All right, we're live, and it was late notice, so I didn't have it in the actual title. But I got my son with me here tonight with this live stream, and yeah, we got lots to talk about. And of course, first up, your papers, please. We're going to need you to show your papers. Actually, no, not to watch this live stream, but you got to get used to that kind of rhetoric being used these days. I've actually experienced it just a couple of days ago while on my duty in the construction industry. Happened to want to get a coffee. Decided to go to I wouldn't even list the name of this particular franchise. But yeah, I wanted to go get a coffee, but unfortunately, I was told I could not. And it was one day before the actual mandate comes. So apparently, the employer felt the onus was on his behalf to go ahead and preempt by starting early by asking me for my papers, please. Yes, to get a coffee. Needless to say, I didn't get my coffee because I don't have my vaccine passport paperwork, and I don't plan on having it anytime soon. And I'm sure this is going to have a much more profound effect than something as simple as wanting to get a cup of coffee. Anyways, not sure where my son went, if he was having issues or not, but he'll be back. Just give it a second there, folks. Like I say, here, just one. There we go. All right. So, like I say, just while we're in the meantime, while we're waiting, we'll let a few people trickle in. Like I say, find out what happened with my son if he was having an issue on the stream here. All right. And I'm going to share, of course, this stream with a few other peeps. Oh, there we go. He's back. He is back. He's back. What's going on, Matt? What happened? We lost you already?
No, I had audio issues, so I just had to quickly reset. The audio's fixed now.
Oh, okay, right on. All right. So yeah, like I was saying and mentioning to a few people who've already joined the stream is I had a run in with the old asking for the papers to get a coffee of all things, and I expect it's going to get much worse from here on out. I could survive without the coffee, but here's something actually. Since we're already starting on the issue and the topic at hand, yeah, maybe I should bring this up. Where was that one? Actually, I don't see it right handy here. I need to have all this stuff. But while I'm looking for the article there, folks, I'll just mention that I believe it was the Ottawa Citizen. And I'm already seeing that they're asking, or they will be soon asking, at a hospital in Ottawa for your vaccine passport, or that you have to be vaccinated to go to the hospital. Yes, folks. No, I'm not joking. No, it's not, April Fool's Day or anything like that. That is a reality. And like I said, I'm just going to look for that article. In the meantime, there, Matt, you can while I'm looking for that, if you want to go ahead and just say what a little bit's on your mind in regard to this stuff.
Well, what's been on my mind is I've actually been spending time to go back in history and reflecting on the last couple of years, because I think we get so caught up in the everyday news cycle and wrapped up on what's going on today that we forget what happened last year or even before this whole pandemic outbreak happened. And it's funny to see how things have progressed. At the beginning of this, right, lab leak was a conspiracy theory, passports were a conspiracy theory. Any negative effects of the vax was a conspiracy theory, and all these things as time progresses are now coming out as truth. So it's been a real eye-opening experience to see the narrative switch, to see people like Doug Ford and Jason Kenney literally say a month prior, no, we would never do a vaccine passport. It would divide the nations, to 1 month later, literally going out and reading off the teleprompter, all right, guys, we're introducing vaccine passports. So that always made me wonder as well. It was Doug Ford and all these prime ministers and all these politicians in America and Canada and Australia and all these places around the world, were they just looking in our eyes and gaslighting us and lying, saying, hey, there will be no more lockdowns, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, no vaccine passports, when they knew damn well that a couple months down the road, they'd be standing in front of the teleprompter reading exactly everything they said they wouldn't do? Or is it something more sinister? Is it that these people are just puppet heads and they're told whatever to say whatever at the time, and whatever narrative comes down from above them. See, we think that Doug Ford, the Jason Kennys, the Justin Trudeau's, that these guys are the guys who run the country, that they have all the power. But all too often you see them reading off and going from a script, right? We have all these countries disconnected all around the globe, but they seem to follow a similar script. They seem to all go in lockdowns around the same time. They seem to all push these vaccine passports all around the same time. So I've just been delving into what got us to this point. And where we stand today is we know now this thing did get leaked out of a lab. And we also know that it has fingerprints all over it from multiple countries, including Canada, including America, including China. And we know now, and me and my father are going to get into this today in this one, and we'll bring up all the articles because we like to show our work, and we like to show, and we'll bring up articles with mainstream news, right? And some people say, okay, we don't believe this news organization that you cite, so we'll even use CBC, Globe and Mail, Toronto Sun. We'll use all the big mainstream guys who've now even been forced to cover the true narrative.
Yeah, okay, I found it there now. And yeah, you're bang on about that. But I did find this, actually, it was CTV. So what it is, it was the Ottawa Citizen is one of those things, and you'll see this happen quite a bit by the established media. They'll start out with one headline, but then it gets edited and later revised or revisited so that you have to try to find it again. But CTV stuck with the original headline, so we'll just use it for the source this particular time. So yeah, there's this, folks. Ottawa Hospital requiring visitors to be fully vaccinated. This was reported on by Josh Pringle on September 23rd, 2021. You will need to be fully vaccinated to visit patients at the Ottawa Hospital. The hospital has announced that starting Monday, it will require proof of vaccinations for visitors entering the hospital. This is to ensure the safety of everyone in the hospital, a statement said. The hospital says the vaccination requirement is only for visitors, not patients visiting the hospital for appointments or medical care. People accompanying someone to the hospital for a medical appointment will need to be fully vaccinated, but there will be exceptions for some circumstances. The Ottawa Hospital announced in August that all staff must be fully vaccinated to work at Ottawa's largest hospital. All staff must have received their first dose by September 7th and their second by October 15th. So basically what this is suggesting here is a little bit of a misleading on that. So I guess if you're just visiting, you're going to visit people in the hospital, you're going to be required to be vaccinated. And of course, if you work at that hospital, you're going to be required to be vaccinated. But what I find strangest above all is if the staff and the visitors have to be vaccinated, and yet if you're a patient in the hospital, you don't need to be vaccinated. I don't know. It's also confusing, folks, because if you're trying to eliminate a virus, shouldn't everybody or nobody? I mean, to me, it's just such a weird situation where some people have to and some people don't. But I mean, if you have someone right now, and I'm not sure when this is going to come into effect, but if you have someone in the hospital right now that you want to visit and you're not vaccinated, well, you might want to get to work visiting them now, because there may come a time very soon where you won't be able to visit them at all. Great. Let me close that one up. And let me see. Oh, yeah. Let me just look into the chat here real quick, see who we got here. Oh, actually, yeah, I noticed Healer, Alma Bay, FBV. Hello from Miracle Beach, British Columbia. Thank you for joining the stream, Helen, or Healer from Alma Bay. Thank you very much. What's this one? Irish Viper. I'm here. Nice. That's a pretty cool username, Irish Viper. Kevin Hayes. I heard courts say the same. So how's that going to work? I wonder. Or for that matter, in regards to sentencing and incarceration. Not quite sure what that's referencing. Was it something reference what you said there, Matt? Or
no, he's talking about I think Kevin's trying to say that they're going to make it so potentially you have to have the vaccine to go to court. Now he's saying, I wonder if that's just for sentencing or incarceration. I imagine there'd be, at first, Kevin, they would start out with the same rules with the hospital, that if you wanted to go visit or assist someone at court or you go with them, you'd probably have to be vaccinated. But obviously, the people who are being criminally charged and brought in, it's going to be difficult. What are they going to let them off with the crime? I doubt that. So the government loves to lock people up. There will be no. They will be locking as many people up as they want, vaccinated or unvaccinated. It'll probably just be for visitors, Kevin.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sounds about right. So let's see what else we got here. Terry M, what's going on, Terry? The worst curse in Canada, Justin Trudeau. I would say that's quite an accurate statement. All the countries are classically trained. All right. Globalist ideology, Kevin Hayes. Oh, who do we got down here? Hansi Fernandez. How are you doing? Thank you for joining the stream. Do we know for sure that it got leaked out from a lab? I thought it is still alleged. Yes, it's still alleged, but it's a very plausible theory, and more evidence seems to be coming to light. And this evidence that's coming to light is not coming from QAnon.
Well, that's what I mean. It depends on who you classify alleged. If you want to go by the fence sitters, the mainstream media, the original ones at the beginning who said it couldn't even be fathomable to be a lab leak, that it would be conspiracy theory, then yes, those scientists are still saying, well, we're looking into it. It's alleging. But the people who are actually delving into this, and virologists and top scientists and doctors who oppose that opinion, have all said 100% this come out of a lab leak. And I mean, you can go look at them trying to poach DARPA, wanting to release coronavirus in bat caves. We're going to get into all that kind of articles today. Governments have been working on biological warfare and coronavirus, SARS-CoV viruses for over a decade or so now. This is what all this gain of function stuff is, with Dr. Fauci being questioned in the United States and Canada, and all having our fingerprints all over gain of function research, which is souping up viruses in the lab to make them more pathogenic, to make them spread more, to make them more deadly. So I would ask this person who say, well, isn't it alleged still? Well, you got a government who's openly admitted on all sides of the political spectrum, even the CBCs have to admit, yes, our governments have done gain of function research. There's been periods in time throughout our government in which we've made it illegal to do so, but there have been periods of time where it was legal to do that research. And when it was made illegal to do so, what governments like Canada and the United States done to get around that, to still continue to look into how to make these viruses more deadly and souped up, is they just shipped it to another country such as China at their Wuhan virology lab, or their virology lab in Wuhan, where China's not so stringent and isn't so anal about their rules in the country. And they're like, we'll allow gain of function research over here in China, whereas Canada and America, politicians and lawmakers looked into this stuff, eventually said, hey guys, maybe we should slow down on this stuff, because if this spills out of a lab one day, we're going to get ourselves into a global pandemic and a lot of trouble. So they banned it in Canada and America recently, where if you look in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, gain of function research was going on in Canada and in America and other labs around the world, totally legal to do so.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to show the articles that we got to reference that. So this one is behind a paywall from the New York Times, but at the very least, you can see the headline there. Where are we at here? So it says a federal ban on making lethal viruses is lifted. And unfortunately, I cannot read that article because, like I say, it's behind a paywall. But don't worry, folks. We got another one here. This one's right from the National Institute of Health.gov. So the government's own website.
Yeah, NIH's own website.
Okay, let me bring that up.
And I've referenced and read the article he's about to pull up. It basically summarizes that in 2014, they paused gain of function research. They paused it in 2014. This is during the Obama administration. He actually put a temporary halt on it because the Obama administration and the people surrounding these NIHs and doing this gain of function, there was someone who looked at it and said, guys, we got to be careful with this stuff. If this spills out of a lab, we're going to be in big trouble. So they put a halt on it. But funny, in 2017, they lifted that pause during the Trump administration, actually. And it's now legal once again to do gain of function research. But all this stuff was going on in Canada as well. Me and my father, we're from Canada. We cover Canadian politics as well. And Canada also has their fingerprints all over this. There was the story of the RCMP that investigated the Winnipeg scientists from the Winnipeg lab for transferring intellectual property to China. And it was basically CCP, which we all know, the Communist Party of China. Any person who leaves the country as a foreigner and goes to work in another country, even if they give up their citizenship and become a Canadian citizenship, if their family members are still left back in China, the CCP has a lot of control over those people, and they put pressure on them to incarcerate or harass their family back home to give up information, intellectual property, and stuff like that. So this has all of our government's fingerprints all over it.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm just reading Gato's comments here. The government is desperate to have everyone vaccinated before winter because people will realize that the vaccinated will become sick and the non-vaccinated will be fine. That's a possible and plausible theory. I will mention that Terry M was asking about, what about the lab in Winnipeg? Was Corona, was it created there? And, you know, that's, once again, that is definitely something that's plausible and possible. Unfortunately, we're not seeing as much a work and effort being put into try to investigate that story. The media is much too busy, unfortunately, Terry, spending their time, the bulk of their day, accusing anyone that questions their narratives of being conspiracy theorists or far right nut bars, right? So if they spent less time swaths of the population and more time doing this investigation, we might be further along in an understanding. But if you do want to get as much information pertaining to that as you want, just to reference one of my most recent live streams that does reference, and you'll see in the description of it, like I say, it's only about 3 streams ago or 2 or 3 videos ago that I discussed the origins. And then, of course, if you type in Wuhan, Winnipeg, and RCMP investigation, you'll see that I've covered that story actually extensively in probably about a half a dozen past live streams. And there's definitely mounting evidence to suggest, at the very least, that there is something suspicious and something did happen at that lab, that level 4 lab. I believe it's Canada's only level 4 lab in Winnipeg. Sorry,
I have it sent to you, and I'll read the headline if you want to find it. It's by CBC, so this is right from state-run media.
Okay, you want me to take this one off and bring it up then, you mean?
Yeah, and the headline is Canadian scientists sent deadly viruses to Wuhan Lab months before RCMP asked to investigate. And this is that National Microbiology Lab, and it was about a shipment from Ebola. And to get to Terry's point there, whether coronavirus was created in Winnipeg, we probably won't know till further down the road where exactly it was created. But with all things that go in the sciences and in the medical, I believe each governments around the globe contribute to the sciences, right? They add their discoveries and findings until eventually there's a breakthrough of the technology.
Mail article?
It's CBC.
Okay, I see the CBC one here.
CBC,
I think actually this may very been, this one. So this one I have covered in the past stream, but once again, we'll link that in this one as well. So let me bring it up here. But I have actually covered this. So, but yeah, listen to this. So this is as it pertains to that. So it says Canadian scientists sent deadly viruses to Wuhan Lab months before RCMP asked to investigate. Documents show concerns about Ebola shipment from National Microbiology Lab, no relation to COVID-19. Now, Ebola isn't obviously, the fact that they shipped Ebola, right, not necessarily tied to COVID-19, which I suppose would be an accurate representation of facts. But nobody's suggesting the shipment of Ebola, right? They shipped other pathogens and viruses as well. This is the thing. And I mean, the fact that they were willing to say that they've talked about or they've shipped these kinds of viruses, there are some things that maybe are still being withheld, hence the point of the investigation, right? So, I mean, I wish it was a nice smoking gun article where, the culprits or the potential alleged or possible culprits come out and basically fessed up all their sins and no need for an investigation any further. But I'm imagining there's a few people in that facility, that organization, who's trying to stay a little bit tight-lipped. So who knows as of yet? Like I say, this is still up in the air. But the sheer fact that most of those in the established media rarely want to discuss or cover this, like I say, and spend more and more of their time promoting or advocating for mandates, using force, or suppressing people's rights, rather than, like I say, doing genuine investigations. It will eventually, I expect, folks, the truth will eventually come to light. How long that's going to take, I don't know. But in the interim, for those of the people who are either fence setters or ones who just blindly trust or are loyal to the government, just like with the vaccine passports, remember? That was a conspiracy theory, right? You remember that? Well, what about when the truth finally does come out and you spent the last 6 months of your life, let's say, calling your buddy a conspiracy theorist for even bringing up the fact that there was a potential connection or tie between the Wuhan lab and the Winnipeg lab in Canada? Well, like I say, maybe you should just hold off on the insults and the rhetoric until the actual facts have come to light. Because that's the point here, is we're actually trying to investigate, well, not me per se, but we're actually trying to get to the bottom of the origins of the coronavirus. Whereas some people, they've already, as far as they're concerned, well, the narrative suits their particular preference and they just want it tied up already and let's just move on. No, the truth is what's most important, and it should be for the rest of you. And I'm sure it is for most of you who are watching this stream. But like I say, I guarantee you have family members, friends, even co-workers, right? Or neighbors who are so out of the loop in terms of they might have never even heard of this. So if you bring it up to them, they'll be like, what are you talking about? What are you, one of those conspiracy theorists? But once again, CBC themselves and a couple of the other established media outlets in this country have actually reported on it. But like I say, it's done very sporadically, and I can't help but wonder why.
Well, that's just it. Like the big question, definitively we can safely say now that coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 was created in a lab. Now, do we know which lab it was created? Do we know in that moment of breakthrough when they actually developed it and had the final pieces in place, was it in a Canadian lab? Was it in an American lab? Was it in China and Wuhan? That part we don't know. That part we might find out. But you got to think, at a certain point, America and Canada said, this is too risky. Our governments don't want to do this stuff. They made it illegal in their country. They shipped it to China. NIH, Fauci, Eco Alliance, all these, Peter Daszak, we're still working with China, and we're sending millions and millions of dollars and scientists over to this Wuhan lab to continue the research. So common sense kind of leads you to believe that it probably didn't have its breakthrough moment. It probably wasn't fully developed yet, because then why go and send all this money and research into China and continue on with the research if you've pretty much wrapped it up and developed this COVID bioweapon? So, that part matters less to me, where it was made and stuff like that. Obviously, we need to figure out how it got released. And that's, I think, is where we move on to the next question. So at first it was, the virus being leaked at a lab, that's a conspiracy theory. Now that's public knowledge. CBC, mainstream, starting to cover it. And now I want to see the narrative shift to people asking the question, well, how did this thing get released? Was it released on purpose or by accident? And that's the big question, because if it was released on purpose, well, then that's biological warfare. People need to be held accountable. I mean, jail, hardcore prison, Nuremberg trials maybe and stuff like that, because, we went to war, Saddam Hussein, he gassed the people and biological warfare in Syria. We've seen our Western nations use that, other governments using biological warfare as a means to invade those countries, as a means to go to war with them, because how dare you do that to your own people, right? That's what we were told over here, to engage in these foreign wars. Well, if we find out that a foreign government, or even such as our own governments, release this biological warfare that is COVID-19 on the public, well, if we're willing to go to war with other countries for such, then we better be willing to hold our own accountable, and people better be going to jail, because that's, more people now have died as a result of COVID-19 than had died in September 9/11. More people have died of coronavirus now, even if you go by their own statistics, than a lot of wars. So what we're dealing with now is a biological war, an attack against the human species that is killing off a lot of people. So we need to deal with this, and people need to be held accountable.
Yeah. Boy, I tell you, sometimes I think that they put out this massive amount of information for the sole purpose of keeping us all confused and confounded and bickering amongst each other. It almost sounds that way. But anyway, so here's another This is an article of the Ottawa Citizen, but it was shared by, it was originally a Telegraph article. So once again, another establishment media source that you can share with all those people who just blindly follow the establishment media and ask them, well, what about this? What about this, right? Wuhan scientists sought to infect bats with coronavirus 18 months before first case, documents show. The research into cave bats in Wuhan may have gone ahead despite denial of funding, said Professor Angus Daglish, University of London. So, I mean, like I say, there, once again, this is a establishment media source. This was just reported recently on September 22nd, 2021. So let me just do a little bit of reading here, get you folks up to speed and what's being said in this particular article. Okay, stop, pause. Okay. Scientists in Wuhan, damn ads. Scientists in Wuhan were planning to release enhanced airborne coronaviruses into Chinese bat populations to inoculate them against diseases that could jump to humans. Reveal leaked grant proposals dated from 2018. Documents show that just 18 months before the first COVID-19 cases appeared, researchers submitted plans to release skin-penetrating nanoparticles containing novel chimeric spike proteins of bat coronaviruses into cave bats in Wuhan, located about 2,000 kilometers southwest of Wuhan. They also plan to create chimeric viruses genetically enhanced to infect humans more easily and requested US $14 million from the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. In case you're not familiar with that particular acronym, it's called DARPA. And like I say, without an establishment media source to reference, if you were to even bring up the term DARPA to your unsuspecting or, indoctrinated fellow citizens, they would be calling you a conspiracy theorist or asking, where is your tinfoil hat? But once again, fortunately, you can raise this issue and use that kind of terminology and reference, once again, an establishment media source. This is how you counteract the propaganda and the true misinformation that's coming out from the establishment media, is by using, like I say, their own sources against them. To me, that's the best plan of attack, folks. I find is extremely effective. And yes, of course, I'm not saying your opponents, the ideologues who are against freedom and liberty, but I'm not saying you're going to convince everyone of them, but at the very least, you're going to cause them to stomp away in mad frustration by the sheer fact that not only are they trying to counter what you're saying, but now they're countering what their own thought leaders are saying. So there's going to be some cognitive dissonance, no doubt about that. It's going to cause some sleepless nights for those folks who have such reverence for authority, but yet are getting confounding or completely different type of stories depending on the day. Right? So that's one thing why, and this is the question I have, knowing the kind of misinformation and propaganda and divisive narratives that the establishment, the hacks in the establishment media and establishment politicians have been using for a long time, even let's go all the way back to the financial crisis of 2008, right? I mean, if that alone hasn't caused you to, at the very least, question these people in terms of their ethics or whether they're trustworthy or not, well, I don't know what else to say to you. If you're foolish or naive enough to just go along what these people are saying or the rhetoric that they're regurgitating, then I just can't help but point out the sheer fact you're very gullible and very naive. And shame on you, but don't expect me, my son, or the rest of us who question these narratives to fall in line in the same kind of manner.
Well, like you just said, I mean, think about this for a minute. DARPA. So these scientists approached DARPA and said, can we have $14 million to go get these nanotechnology spike proteins, spray them on bats in a cave? And DARPA, which, I mean, if you listen to DARPA, as my father just said, Defense Advanced, it spews military corporation, basically, right? They're developing defensive military technologies, right? Building tanks, they're developing missiles, they're developing robotics, and then all of a sudden these guys are like, hey, do you guys want to get into the biological warfare since you're into the military defense stuff? And even DARPA told them, no, get out of here with that stuff's too dangerous. So that should tell everyone a lot when DARPA says, we're not touching this stuff. And this information that come out, if you go and search the source and file where it came from, it was a Freedom of Information request filed at DARPA. So even DARPA kind of blew the whistle and said they didn't want to be associated with this stuff. Flu world order. Yeah, that's good.
Good one, GTO Mom, and thanks for joining the stream. Long time well, I guess see you're here, but nice to see you in the stream. My fault, of course, in terms of the long time no see you're here. But anyway, so yeah, let me get back. I'll read just a little bit more because I find that that article be a little bit interesting. Maybe there's some more information that we can glean from this article. So they hope to introduce human-specific cleavage sites to bat coronaviruses, which would make it easier for the virus to enter humans. When COVID-19 was genetically sequenced, scientists were puzzled about how the virus had evolved such a human-specific adaptation at the cleavage site on the spike protein, which is why it is so infectious. The documents were released by an investigations team called Drastic, set up by scientists to look into the origins of COVID-19. Are you allowed to call people scientists who question the official narrative? I thought that was illegal these days, or at least faux pas, right? They're actually calling these people scientists. So, gee, I thought you weren't allowed to be a scientist if you're questioning the narrative.
Well, let me pause to that. Isn't it funny how the saying is trust the science, but
yeah,
the whole concept of science is to constantly try to debunk and figure out, get to the scrutinize and get to the answer of life's questions, right? Like breakthrough sciences, discovering gravity, discovering how that the earth is not the center of the universe. All these things came from scrutinizing and going against the public at the time and saying, well, maybe this possibility is possible. And now it's trust the science. Meanwhile, the whole concept of science is don't trust, scrutinize, and repeat.
Well, let's not forget doctors are scientists, right? Or at least based on the scientific method for the most part. And you could go back right now. Matter of fact, I'm sure you can even find them still available on YouTube of commercials from 50, 60, 70 years ago, probably, or at least that, where 2 and 3 doctors recommend Camel. Oh, no, they're good for you. Oh, yeah, no, nothing to see here, folks. Move along, right? It's like, well, it turns out they're quite a few carcinogens in there. Turns out they can really fuck a man up. Right? Cancer can be a real bitch, but hey, it was settled science at the time that 2 and 3 doctors recommend Camels. Like, I mean, come on. So we all know that what was considered settled science at some point in time in the past, and some of the examples that my son referenced is no, that the whole point of advancing scientific research and knowledge is the fact that you learn new things, right? And you get to debunk or deny some of those settled science facts in the past, right? I mean, if we didn't, and the best example, and Matt was alluding to it, is, and I love using this with other people actually, is the old adage, and because I'm a big fan of history and astronomy, and Copernicus and Galileo, like I say, at the time, it was settled science that the Earth was the center of the universe. And if you dared to question that settled science or orthodoxy, it was considered pure blasphemy. And you would have been punished and penalized for daring to do so. And many of those were, right? But yet, as we know today, not only was it not settled science, it was an absolute farce. And the fact that the majority of people actually believed it, once again, showed that even back then, conforming to authority was part and parcel of groupthink, right? Which is why I don't want to be part of groupthink. I like to use my mind individually and to question some of these things. And so do, I'm sure, most of you people. Unfortunately, we have a lot of our peers in society who don't. That's the issue that we really have to deal with profoundly, is the very real fact. We have a lot of people, like I say, family members, friends, co-workers, neighbors, who are willing to turn their backs on those of us who just, want to stand up and fight for our rights and our freedoms and challenge some of the orthodoxy and the rhetoric being espoused, and are unwilling to question it themselves. There are a lot of people out there right now who are more than willing to turn a blind eye to some of the grave injustices and harms who are being caused by those who challenge the official narrative. And that's a profound effect that, like I say, many times through many countries and many jurisdictions in the past, where the people turned their blind eye towards those who were questioning authority. And as we turned out, right, if you were questioning the scientific consensus in Nazi Germany, you were a bad person for daring to do so. Although today we recognize, no, you were a brave, courageous individual, and we applaud you nowadays, and most people rightfully should. Right? Same thing under most authoritarian collective regimes. It was always a small minority or a small group of individuals who were challenging the authority or the official narrative of the day. And that was also usually considered to be a good thing, right? Even the very fact now where people are bringing up the Nuremberg Code, right? And you're seeing the establishment media, rather than trying to properly explain the Nuremberg Code, you have people in the media and other people who are regurgitating the fact, oh no, the Nuremberg Code had nothing to do with the fact that they want to impose scientific or medical procedures on you. It's it did have everything to do with that. And the fact that there are people in the media who are willing to bend over backwards to try to distort the reality of that history in order to suit their own biases and preference today. Yeah, like I say, why would why would anyone want to trust people who are willing to be so nefarious with their rhetoric and deny these kinds of terrible things that happen throughout history in the West? If you're willing to do that just for the sake of, remaining part of the group or the collective, I got no trust in you. I have no faith in your ability to discern truth from fiction. And I definitely wouldn't hold my arm out for any one of you to place a substance in my body that I already question.
Okay, so about this article, though, I want to break it down, because what I'm about to say is very important, and it'll segue into the next one. So in this article, this is by mainstream media. This is not fake news. This is not debunked. These scientists wanted to. Now, go up and read the heading again. How are they going to affect these bats in the cave? Were they going to spray them with like an aerosol? Is that the concept of how they're going to do this? They're going to aerosolize spray these spike protein pathogens on the bats in there? Is it a spray how they do this, or do they capture these bats and inject them, or like how does it actually say the methodology in which the bats get affected?
Release enhanced airborne. Does it specify?
Okay, so enhanced airborne. So that would lead me to believe they're spraying airborne. They're letting loose this virus in this cave with the bats, right? To affect the bats.
Right.
So it's an aerosolized coronavirus adapted to be more affected to humans. So just think about this, guys. That just tells everyone right now they have an aerosolize. They're able to aerosolizedly spray coronaviruses. Okay, now can you please bring up the article that I sent you from Yahoo News? The heading is GOP report says October 2019 Wuhan military games were one of the earliest super spreader events.
Okay.
This is an article by Yahoo News, once again, a mainstream media. Now we're going to move into the area of speculation. This is me putting my best amateur research into all these topics and how I understand an opinion of what I think transpired and what happened. Okay.
Okay, I see it here. I got it. Let me just bring it up and share it.
So hear me out, guys. So before the Wuhan virus gets released, okay? Before it gets released, we have the American election going on with Trump and Biden. It was looking like Trump was going to win. We also had a lot of things going on globally, right? There was the whole Epstein case was just breaking the news cycle. We had India electing Modi, who was kind of being like an Indian nationalist. We had obviously the trade war going on with China, which was costing them trillions of dollars. And it was going to cost them a lot more in money if they let Trump win versus Biden. And we can see now with Biden being the president for the last little bit, how that's benefited China versus if Trump would have been reelected, how that would have negatively affected China, right? So hear me out. What if in these October 2019 Wuhan military games, they released the same aerosol coronavirus that they were going to release in the bat caves on this military event? Now, why would you do that as a country? Let's say China. Why would they do that? Well, let's see. Let's go through the motive. Let's play detective here. You now send back all of these military soldiers from different countries affected with a biological weapon, who now return to their countries and affect their own populations. And not only do they affect their own populations, they return to military outposts, right? They're soldiers. So as a Chinese government who is number 2 in power, who wants to become the world superpower, doesn't it make sense that you would never invade America by taking them out by guns, right? The famous saying is, there's a blade behind every blade of grass in America, there's weapons. So you can never take on America in a physical fight. So what's China do? They take them on in a biological weapon, right? They release this aerosol spray at the October Wuhan military games. And what do we also know? We also know at the time of the beginning of the lockdowns, China didn't allow interstate travel, right, out of Wuhan. But they did allow flights from Wuhan to go fly into Canada, right? We all laughed about this at the beginning. Like, we have a pandemic coming out of Wuhan, and they strategically locked down China, but they allowed flights out of China. So that leads me to believe, as put my detective hat on here, that China had a motive and an incentive to let the virus get out of the country rather than keep it in. Now, why would that benefit China? Well, now you got Joe Biden in there because you had all the mail-in ballots and all that funny stuff, right? And then you get China now gets to use the cover of the virus to cover up all the things that were going on. Now they don't have to worry about the trade war because they got Biden in. Now they don't have to worry about Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong, they got shut up, right? Nobody talks about Hong Kong anymore. No protests in Hong Kong. Funny, after the virus hit. And then we leading into now they want to attack Taiwan. So I'm laying it out for you guys, folks. This is my opinion. Okay, I'm not an expert, but just me looking at it. If it acts like a duck, quacks like a duck, I'm calling it a duck. Even Yahoo News and everyone's saying, hey, guys, we were going to ask DARPA to aerosolize spray for $14 million, these bat caves, but you don't think that they could have aerosolized spray the military games in Wuhan in October 2019 that released the whole damn thing? I don't know how. We'll figure it out, but the motive is there. The financial motive is there. The power they gained, the fact that all the wealth was transferred to the upper class into the Amazons and the Walmarts, but the small businesses all got crushed. All our countries and all the Western nations were shut down, while places like China were having pool parties in Wuhan. So all the incentive and motive is there, but people want to turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part about it is there are people who are so giddy with excitement and who have seemed to made out so advantageous as a consequence of all this. This is the part that I find most disturbing, is there's not just people out there in the established media or established politicians who are begrudgingly, right? I mean, it'd be different, and they're not even that good of actors, right? Maybe they should be hiring Hollywood folks rather than some of these established media politicians, because they're not doing a very good job of even being somewhat convincing for people who are actually questioning or thinking individuals. I mean, these are people who have exuberance, who are excited, who say some really, really funny, well, not funny as in ha-ha, but strange kind of funny stuff in terms of how this is all playing out. There are people, like, perfect example, you know, if you're a government worker or a part of the bureaucracy, I mean, you've had more paid vacation since last year, right, than you've ever had during all the other prior years of your occupation or your employment. Not to mention the fact that you've also, a lot of those, especially those low level, let's say middle or lower management types, who really didn't have much power and were always burdened with all the top-down bureaucracy from their higher-ups. Well, now, with all these mandates, restrictions, and impositions on our freedom, well, it is spread. I mean, it has democratized the ability for people to control and micromanage everyone else's lives, right? I mean, think about all those low-level bureaucrats now, or even some of the people in the corporate world who now have this authority to dictate who are allowed to come and go, where they're allowed to go, if you're allowed to eat, if you're allowed to go to the hospital, if you're allowed to, watch a movie, if you're allowed. I mean, think about it. Like I say, think about it. And the fact, and the other aspect of it is, even the businesses who support this, you would think, well, that doesn't make no sense for a business to support actually doing things that are going to greatly affect their bottom line. Well, yes, that would sound plausible and actually genuinely legit if it wasn't for the fact that, no, they're going to get all topped up by government coffers and continue to be propped up by the government, like they have been since the very beginning of these pandemic lockdowns, right? So these corporations, these businesses, the bureaucracy, the public sector, big government, the media, they're all benefiting economically and socially. And then even when you get to the point where it's just the mandating. So now that the federal and provincial employees, the bureaucracy, are now being mandated for these vaccines, well, if you're going to be forced to do it, of course, that automatically is going to incentivize you that, well, if I got to do it, well, so should they, right? So it's that race to the bottom. It's that race to the lowest common denominator again. And like I say, the last holdouts, and no matter how much that percentage remains, folks. So whether they're saying, a little while back when it was up to half of the population who are unwilling to get a vaccine, whether we get beyond the point now where they've used so much bullying, intimidation, and threats of force and coercion, even if you get down to there's just a 10% holdout, because they're saying now they're going to shoot for 90% immunity. Well, no, that's not how it works, because once they get to 90%, then they're going to be even more emboldened to target that small 10% who won't go along, because then they'll use an even more line of reasoning, which is like, now, why should 90% of the population, have to suffer or have their lives put on hold because of these 10% of fucking idiots that won't do what we tell them, right? So like I say, the more this gets ramped up, whether it's the rhetoric or the impositions on our freedoms, eventually there's not going to be any place to turn. So the fence sitters, those who are like, well, maybe I should just go along. I mean, you do it now. You make your choice now, but once you've made that choice, you better recognize that you're going to have to make quite a few other profound choices going forward, because this isn't ending anytime soon, folks. You got to remember, let's keep in mind now, we went from 2 weeks to flatten the curve to almost 2 years to flatten the rest of us in society. So not working out so well, folks.
And you got to think too, like we always tell, you understand America and their global expansion of their military, and every time they go into a country and invade another country, they always say that they're spreading democracy, right? The concept of spreading the idea of democracy to Syria, to Afghanistan, and to take these undeveloped countries and turn them into developing countries. Well, we never would imagine that communist China, the number 2 superpower in the world, would never want to spread their ideology. Now, they don't spread democracy, they spread communism. So you don't think that Western nations, we want to grow as a superpower, we want to spread our way of governance? You don't think that the number 2 superpower, communism, they want to spread their ideologies? And let's just look in the last 2 years underneath these pandemics, how the growth of democracy versus communism has grown, right? And if you look, we basically had Hong Kong has now lights out. It's now communism taking over Hong Kong. So there goes another democracy fell to communism. We had the Cuba rising up. But with all the pandemic stuff going on, they can be even more heavy-handed with their tactics with the police and more aggressive on the embargoes and stuff because of the lockdown mandates. So Cuba is struggling once again. They fell. You got Venezuela trying to rise up down there as well, and they basically fell back to communism with hyperinflation. And now we got Biden handing over Afghanistan basically to the Taliban, who are already having meetings with China, and another one basically falling. So I look around the globe right now in the last couple of years, and I've seen communism do pretty well. I've seen states on a map, different countries on the globe where communism ideologies are rising. I mean, just look at the Canadian universities and some of the propaganda we're seeing in the schools now. So, nobody thinks that any of this is strategic, though, right? China's just this omnipotent second place superpower, and they're totally fine with staying in second place, and they're happy. They don't want to spread their communism to anywhere. I'm sure they've never put any of their little foot soldiers in to work as undercover agents in all of our countries to try to buy our politicians, to bribe our judges, to bribe our scientists, to give us intellectual property. I'm sure none of that happens, though, right? China's just a great superpower, and they're loving.
Yeah, I will mention, and thanks for bringing that up, Cine Allegria is, yes, definitely check out YouTube site Press for Truth, or even if you don't want to go directly to YouTube, let's say you're wanting to go directly to the source himself, you can always check out Dan Dixon Press for Truth on many of the other social media platforms as well. But yeah, definitely check him out. Like I say, Press for Truth, and he actually has a website, which is pressfortruth.ca, I believe. But yeah, Dan's been around for a long time, and he's definitely a really good guy in terms of, trying to get to the bottom of things and being independent and an investigative journalist. So yeah, definitely check out Dan Dix at Press for Truth. But what I wanted to bring up once again, folks, and like I say, as I typically do, because to me, it's the most important thing is to get the information out to those who genuinely need to hear it. And like I say, unfortunately, for us, it requires that we rely on promoting the establishment media in some way, in some regard. But you know what? If your goals are worthy and noble, at the end of the day, hopefully it'll work out best for all involved. But check this one out, folks. So this here's from the Washington Post. So nobody can definitely accuse the Washington Post of being some far right, organization or conspiracy theorist type group, right? But here it is, right here, folks. And this is the part which most people, whether you're pro-vaccine or not, that's a moot point. To me, it's you do you, I'll do me. At the end of the day, though, what it should come down to is, are you pro forcing or imposing your will on others? That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. And it turns out, no, it is absolutely not needed or necessary to impose these vaccine mandates or passports on the people. And why? Because there's another way that you can build up immunity to COVID-19 and its iterations and variants without having to get the jab or multiple jabs. And that's called natural immunity. And this, like I say, this headline from the Washington Post, natural immunity to COVID is powerful. Policymakers seem afraid to say so. Do they ever? People making decisions about their health deserve honesty from their leaders. They do, but they're not getting it. So let me just bring this up. So this was by Marty Macare, I guess is the name, contributing September 15th at 2021. Okay, so let me just read the correction real first. A previous version of this article erroneously said Spectrum Health is in Detroit. It is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So, okay, minor discrepancy in terms of the correction there is just a matter of a jurisdiction in Michigan. Anyway, so it's okay to have an incorrect scientific hypothesis, but when new data proves it wrong, you have to adapt. Unfortunately, many elected leaders and public health officials have held on far too long to the hypothesis that natural immunity offers unreliable protection against COVID-19, a contention that is being rapidly debunked by what? Really, by science. Once again, science just seems to be all over the place, as it should be, right? But here we go again. I'm surprised they didn't use the term expert, right? But either way, more than 15 studies, folks, have demonstrated the power of immunity acquired by previously having the virus. A 700,000 person study from Israel 2 weeks ago found that those who had experienced prior infections were 27 times less likely to get a second symptomatic COVID infection than those who were vaccinated. Ooh, chalk that one up for the unvaccinated. Yeah, way to go. This affirmed a June Cleveland Clinic study of healthcare workers who are often exposed to the virus, in which none, and that's not a minority, folks, that says none, who had previously tested positive for the coronavirus got reinfected. The study authors concluded that individuals who have had SARS-CoV-2 infection are unlikely to benefit from COVID-19 vaccination. And in May, a Washington University study found that even a mild COVID infection resulting in long-lasting immunity. So even if you just got a real small dose of the coronavirus through natural, through, let's say, an aerosol or someone standing in front of you, is you actually you're in much better shape now to protect you, not just against, like I say, the original coronavirus, but all of those supposedly much more deadly or contagious variants such as the Delta. So actually you're doing much better, folks, and not just by a small degree, but by a substantial margin, just by having natural immunity from an infection. And the fact that the WHO many months ago now removed, I don't know if they've since reversed course and put it back there, but they took out the fact that you can actually gain immunity through natural immunity by contacting or contracting the virus The fact that they tried to remove that from the World Health Organization, or either that or it was the CDC, it was one of them. I believe it was actually the World Health Organization. Once again, really makes you want to question these people. The fact that they're willing to lie and go against all of this proof and these facts, because like I say, the facts are coming to light, folks. So here it is once again. Why would you have to be forced, right? So think about it. If you, I'll use me as an example. Let's say I got COVID-19, back 3 months ago. I obviously, based on all of these studies and these facts, right? I already have amazing immunity, much better than all those other people who have gotten their vaccine. Yeah, if I went to go visit, as I was reading you earlier, if I wanted to go visit someone in the hospital, I'm not allowed to go visit, let's say, my aging or elderly grandparents who's dying in a hospital bed. I'm not allowed to go visit them, even though I have much less chance of infecting or spreading or causing any harm to anyone, or even myself of being susceptible by being harmed than other people. So this is the part, like I say, that I find most disturbing is they're pumping up the rhetoric in terms of you have to get vaccinated and you have to have the passport, when in reality, like I say, the facts as it pertains to the actual natural immunity suggest that no, you're much, much better shape, and you're going to continue to be in much better shape going forward by the simple fact that you've gained natural immunity, that your biology actually worked as it's intended to.
Well, that's like, it's good to know the finish line and where we're headed so you can know the journey. And, people always say, well, we got our double jabs, and why is there still a pandemic? Or why doesn't this make sense? Or why are they not talking about natural immunity? Well, bringing it back to the idea of communism. When you understand where they want to go, you understand that everything you see is just a tool to get them there. Okay. The vaccines and everything was designed to fail, because you know what, guys, if the vaccines all worked and we all got herd immunity or natural immunities and the pandemic was over, we would go back to our normal way of life, like the politicians pretended, right? And they say, oh yeah, if we get back to those numbers, we'll live our life normal. They don't want to return back to the normal way of life because it's getting us accustomed and used to authoritarian control, right? If you flip the switch and made America communism overnight, there would probably be a civil war. It would happen too quick. But if you do it under the guise of, well, there's a pandemic, and this is why we need the state to control a business. This is why we need the state to control medicine. This is why we need the state to dictate if your kids can play at the park down the road, and don't be in a group more than 6, and don't be in, make sure you take your medications. It's the concept of the state telling people what to do, which is communism. That's what fascism is, right? The state working hand to hand with corporations. So it's all about controlling the human being, spreading the idea of communism, and not just communism. Communism is just one subsect. It's all about control, right? Top-down control. And that's what this all wants. This is what it's all leading to. So the vaccine passport, it's just a small stepping stone to the social credit score, which is what this is all heading to. You see CBC talking about China bringing theirs in years ago. And then you see internal Canadian government documents showing how Canadian governments need to start working with the Chinese, and how they're going to be using their social credit score to run their country, and how we as Canadians can adapt to that. And that's what it's all leading to, folks. It's going to get to a point where you will have a score, just like we all have a credit score, right? And Matthew and my father here, because we are out here and we're speaking against this stuff, well, we're going to have a low credit score. We're bucking the system. We're going against the man. So we're going to lose privileges, right? Just like the unvaccinated. We're not going to be able to go to hospitals. We're not going to be able to go to concerts. And they're going to slowly bring the noose around your neck until they kill you. That's the plan, guys. Unfortunately, that's where it goes. I mean, you look at throughout history, and you look at any kind of communistic dictatorships that rose in history. Where did it all lead? It led to people getting shot in the head and thrown in a ditch. Now, we're in the modern era, so we don't know if it'll exactly play out that way, because that's a little barbaric, and we've gotten a lot more advanced. And now we can kill people, as we see now, with biological weapons. So maybe it's not the Hitler utopian dream of just gassing the Jews and putting people in ditches and shooting them in the back of the head, like Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, and all these other communist dictators throughout history. Maybe it's the communists just release a biological weapon that goes out and kills a bunch of people that way. But these articles we went through today showed you They 100% have an aerosolized coronavirus that they admitted that they were going to spray into the caves. We now know 100% that the military games were some of the earliest super spreader events, and communism has benefited in the last 2 years, while democracies and freer nations like Canada, Australia, Europe, and everywhere else have suffered drastically under these lockdowns. So to me, it makes total sense once you know what the end game is, what their motives are. Then all of it falls into place. And this is why me and my dad have said since the beginning, the pandemic's not going away. The lockdowns are never ending. They'll give you a little bit of freedom in the summer. They'll lock it back down in the fall and winter. It was all designed this way so they can accustom you to get used to this stuff.
Mr. Briggs asked, are passports in place across all of Canada? Now, from what I understand, Mr. Briggs, is they're all in a particular stage of developing the strategy or how it's going to unfold across Canada. Some of them have already imposed it, and the policy's already in effect now, such as I know Ontario, British Columbia, New Brunswick, of course, Quebec, definitely. I think Quebec was actually one of the very first ones, I believe, that actually rolled out their vaccine passports. But there are, I believe, some jurisdictions it's still in the works. But I believe pretty much all of them that I'm aware of are working on some form of a vaccine passport, as far as I know. As far as I know, if anyone else has any conflicting information,
there will be nowhere to hide. It'll come to every town near you eventually. Eventually, it'll all be universal. There'll be pockets of freedom, maybe Texas and other places like that, who will have leadership who are more stern and more freedom oriented. And until they fall, and then they try to get re-electing some communist socialist guy to replace him. But for the most part in Canada, unfortunately, with the local election and Trudeau just getting re-elected, we don't have a Ron DeSantis. We don't have anyone like the Florida and Texas governors and stuff like that who want to keep things opened up. Unfortunately, the passport, to get to Mr. Briggs' point, it'll, like my father was saying, it'll eventually be across the entire country of Canada. It'll just happen at different times. That's it.
Yeah. And another great question from Mr. Briggs: how can one make an informed decision when one cannot get the full information needed to make such decision? I hear you there, Mr. Briggs, and it's a terrible shame that these hacks in the establishment media aren't doing a much better job. Like I say, and I won't place them all under the same proverbial bus, because as we've seen, there are some contributors, a minority of them, to these establishment media publications or outlets who are giving us some proper information. The problem is they're profoundly overnumbered and overwhelmed by their counterparts in those media organizations, who are mostly repeating and regurgitating the establishment talking points. So, like I say, I hear what you're saying. It's a really difficult thing to make an informed decision. But one thing I will say to add another layer to that informed decision, let's talk about the fact that we're talking about also dealing with informed consent, because this is another word that we're seeing bantered around quite a bit, and you'll definitely hear it much more going forward as these vaccine passports and mandates get ramped up, is to suggest, to even mirror, to or even hint at the fact that there's even anything remotely resembling informed consent when there's a direct implied threat of force or coercion back in every government. Because once again, let's keep this in mind, folks. Now, we libertarians, we understand this intrinsically, but for those who aren't libertarians or well-versed in what government is at its core, at its root, what the purpose of government is, well, government is force. So when you're talking about, and mandates, if you look up that word, a mandate is force. It's compulsion. It's compelling someone. It's using coercions or threats of force. So when someone is threatening you, there is no such thing. Once you're under the duress of being threatened by use of force or coercion, or of potential monetary punitive actions in terms of fines, or even the potential of imprisonment, there is no such thing as informed consent. Consent is gone. It's out the window. It is negated. It does not exist the minute you're threatening the use of force or coercion against an individual. So anyone that's trying to suggest, oh, no, you still have the opportunity to consent. Look, we're giving you all these opportunities. No, they're not giving. All they're doing is giving you the opportunity to submit, right? They're offering you the opportunity to finally to relent and to submit. They're just using the bullying tactics at this point in time or the implied threats. The force so far hasn't been ramped up on a large scale, but why that is by the sheer fact that the overwhelming majority of the Canadian population are submitting. And the numbers of vaccinated in this country clearly show and display that. We're talking Canada wide, where at least 3/4 of the population who are eligible to be vaccinated have already done so. And in some jurisdictions, it's even higher than that. Some jurisdictions are reaching close to 80%. I know New Brunswick is 78 point whatever percent. And even for the single jab, you're looking upwards now close to what, 85, 86%. So you're talking the overwhelming majority of people who are submitting and compliant because the threats and the intimidation has worked, right? So informed consent, no. These are threats. And like I say, the minute threats are that's like, could you imagine using that as an example for a woman you want to sleep with? You got her locked up in your basement. You're like, you're still feeding her. You're letting her even take a piss in a bathroom when she needs to, right? But she can't leave the house. She can't leave your basement until she has sex with you, right? I mean, eventually, if she does break down, I suppose you could say, look, I didn't have to rape her, right? Hey, she complied. She gave me consent to mount her, right? But did she really? I mean, the fact that you locked her up in the basement, wouldn't let her leave, I mean, that probably plays a role in her decision to submit or to give in some kind of a consent, right? But that's a strange thing that we see today. And this is the part that baffles me most too, is how it's the proportion of those on the left side of the political spectrum are the ones who are now saying, no, informed consent doesn't mean what it means. My body, my choice no longer means what it means, right? It's like autonomy, bodily autonomy, and the sovereignty of the individual no longer means what it means. That's how you know that these people have nefarious underlying meanings or structures in their mind as to why they're doing what they're doing. Because, like I say, people who are willing to bend their minds into pretzel-like shapes to, suggest that 2 + 2 is 5, there should you. But anyways, let me just bring this up real quick here, Matt, because this is another article. This too is out of the Telegraph, so established media source. We're all likely to catch COVID, and that makes continuing restrictions obsolete. Why, when the worst of the pandemic is over, is the government seeking to renew its emergency powers for a further 6 months? So yeah, that's a great question. Now, once again, this one is from behind a paywall, but let me just read the first little paragraph here. I was in no particular hurry to get the COVID vaccine. I had already had the disease, quite a nasty bout, since you ask. It seemed to me that my immune system would be better trained by the actual current version of the virus than by a theoretical form of it developed a year earlier in a Pfizer lab. So anyways, like I say, I'll bring this back out of here. But yeah, I mean, just like with any other variant or form of coronavirus or airborne viruses, is yes, and they're even admitted now, some of the media outlets, that it's an endemic now, folks. It's going to be a yearly thing. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So once again, what is the point of the vaccine mandates or these passports if it's now gone from pandemic to endemic to the point where every year, and they're already talking about that booster shot, right? So even those who got double vaxxed and have been patting themselves on the back for bowing and conforming to their political masters or their authority, well, now even they are probably going to start to question, well, wait a minute, I did everything you fuckers demanded of me. I wore the mask all that time, right? I kept my social distancing. I did everything you asked and demanded of me, right up to the point of taking 2 experimental vaccines under emergency use authorization, I'll add, when they weren't properly and fully, studied to the point where they were given genuine full-on authorization, but these were emergency authorized, but they did all of that, right? Crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and now even they are not only going to have to get their booster shot, but their vaccine passports won't be updated unless they do, or there might be another variant that comes out and they'll have to get another, vaccine. So once again, and then there's also that spoiler alert here, folks. I hate to say this too, because I'm sure most of you are already well aware of this, but this has got to be really hard and demeaning. to the fully vaccinated that, yeah, by the way, those of you who are fully vaccinated, not only you still got to show your papers, but you still got to mask up. You still got to social distance, and you're still going to have big brother, big government watching over every aspect or every move you make. So doesn't matter what you do, folks. You're still going to be placed in the crosshairs of those who want to have control over every aspect of your social and economic life.
Before we went live, me and my father went back and forth on some banter, and we always, as coming from two people who are aware of what's going on right now, it's very difficult to understand, the mindset of the average person who, runs to the thing, double doses, wears the double mask, believes everything that the government tells them to do so. But then we also got to pull ourselves back and realize this screen behind me, this TV, right? Now, the average lifespan of a human is in mid-70s. So we go back 2 generations. That's about 140 years. 3 generations, we're past 200 years. So just a couple generations back, this technology didn't exist, this screen, right? Now, how do human beings learn, right? How does a newborn baby go from crapping its pants and muttering and not even able to do anything to a productive little teenager or whatever the case may be? Well, they study the parents, right? We learn through visual. We learn through copy, right? So we watch our parents. We watch them do things around the house. We listen to them, how they speak, and slowly we catch on to these things. So humans are social creatures, and we learn through observation. Now, this technology behind me, this TV, this ability to beam in these messages through my visual cortexes and manipulate my thoughts didn't exist just a couple generations ago. This is all new technology, right? So I think sometimes we got to step back and pinch ourselves and realize that, man, we are up against some very advanced technology, and the concept brainwashing is a real thing. Propaganda is a real thing. And it's really gotten mastered in the last 100 years. Now, sure, they had propaganda in the olden days, and sure, they had upper propaganda with the printing press, but it's way different nowadays. And someone you run into out in the public who's double masked up and who will yell at you for walking into a store without a mask, you need to look at that person, understand that is a severe victim of these technologies used against them. Because me and my father, we're political. So we'll come home at the end of the day and we'll open the news and we'll see what's going on. The average public, they work their 9 to 5. They might put a couple hours a night on TV. And what are they going to initially go to? CBC and all the mainstreams, because they're the easiest ones to click onto their TVs, right? They're not going and digging in and doing all this research and trying to figure out alternative medias, right? They got a couple hours in the day. They just got home from work. They got to help the kids. They got to help the wife. They got things to do around the house. Let me just veg here for about an hour if I got an hour. So that's the normal public, right? Society keeps us so busy, we barely have enough time to be informed nowadays. And those people you meet in public, who are the people that we get so frustrated about, they are truly victims. They've only been able, all the things coming in, whether it's their friends giving them feedback, their family, the news sources that they're watching, all of those people are only confirming to their mindset that this virus is deadly. You got to lock down. People that are against you are out there to kill you. The unvaccinated are going to kill you and grandma. So, we need to realize that, yes, we can be mad at these people, but realize that they're a victim of the situation. They're a victim of the society and the technologies being used to manipulate these folks. And now us, the activists, we need to be able to realize how to adapt, how to be smart. The same way that we understand propaganda is a powerful tool, right? If it wasn't, then they wouldn't censor us, right? And it was propaganda that convinces the guy to wear the double mask and go and get double jab because he's scared of a virus he can't see. That's all propaganda that makes that guy go do that. Well, the same way we can use propaganda to make him resist that. So in all reality, this falls on the activist shoulders. And why me and my father even do this podcast here. Us who are informed, us who are awake, we have to get out there and reach these people. Now, some of them are too far gone. Some of them are not. We may never actually get the numbers to tip. Like, I don't think we're going to get to a point where 51% of people are going to be totally awoke and 49, and that's when we're going to take the globe back. No, we see the American Revolution. It only took a small minority of active people to restore freedom. That majority of the people during the time didn't even want freedom. So I think we're going to reach that same scenario where we just need a small active minority who understands the technology and tools that we need to use effectively, the same way they're used effectively against us, against the propagandists, to bring the system down.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring another one up. Actually, this article, oh, never mind. I can't. It's behind a paywall as well.
Well,
All right.
one more point I wanted
Yep.
to touch on that last thing about humans and how we learn through visuals. So the Guardian put out a story, an article, and I'll just read you guys the heading here. It says, children born during the pandemic have lower IQs, U.S. study finds. And this U.S. study found that children now born under the pandemic are losing 10 to 20 IQ points. That's huge, guys. Someone with an IQ of 100 versus someone with an IQ of 80 or someone with an IQ of 80 and you get to 60, we're talking major cognitive differences, okay? And capabilities and ability to work in society. So this is the biggest crime against humanity going on right now is the fact, and I live across from a school, is looking out every day and seeing all these children covered up and masked up. And the fact that all these developing minds that are going to learn and develop through watching facial expressions and studying the world around them now have to learn and through a face mask, us muffling like this, barely being able to hear each other, what we have to say. And literally, as you see, the science by the Guardian's own article are getting stupider because of this whole pandemic. It's all going to be just a disaster down the road. The inflation, the economy, the debt, this dumbing down from kids learning through masks in the pandemic. We're not headed to a good place if we don't turn this around.
Yeah, I was just scrolling through my mind's feed to look for some other material or reference. And I just got to bring this up, folks, because I'm actually, other than the fact, there's one gripe I still have with Russell Brand. I hope that someday somebody will remedy it and he'll come to correct some of the terminology he uses, because we're still on this thing. He's trying his best, I think, with the learning what the system we live under is. It's not capitalism, Russell Brand. He does, I will say, he at least puts in the effort. He calls it crony capitalism, but he's still stuck on using that term capitalism, which is obviously nothing what we're living under today, because capitalism is just economic, activity in the hands of private individuals. No government, coercion, force, or threats thereof involved. But one thing I will say is even people who predominantly would be predisposed to be on the left politically and have reverence for celebrities. So people would say that, like someone like Joe Rogan would say, oh yeah, well, that's just bunch of right-wingers that follow Joe Rogan. Well, once again, historically, most people who would have been fans of, let's say, Russell Brand would have been on the opposite of the political spectrum, so on your political left. But yet even Russell Brand today is coming quite regularly, I'll say, on a daily basis even, talking about and suggesting the very same things that people such as I or my son are saying. And in this particular one that I was listening, if you go to his channel, it's how the elites trained you to hate. Good video to watch, to be honest with you. And I definitely agree with his summation or his summarizing of how this has been playing out and how it's the media and the establishment politicians who are stirring up animosity, fear, and hatred among us all. But yet projecting by pointing out to the people that they keep insulting, right? So they're down there saying, you anti-vaxxers, you knuckle-dragging conspiracy theorists. And then they try to suggest that it's people that they just sit and smeared through the mud are the ones that are causing division, right? It's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe if you didn't sit and call me a bunch of names and insult me and attack my character, but this is the world we live in. But I did want to bring this up too. Actually, let me just show on my Minds page, because like I say, you find lots of great information over there, folks. If you're not over on Minds, I definitely recommend you head on over there. Really easy site to navigate. Let me see if it's up here. Yeah. Okay. So if you look here, like I say, this particular article, this is out of CP24. And I just love the picture because it's just pictures speak so much without saying a word, right? But the actual headline was planned protests outside Ontario hospitals next week spark outcry. But yeah, look at the picture, right, of these planned protesters. Look at that. Looks like an elderly lady. Looks like an older gentleman. You see another woman standing up there. Looks like she's got a microphone. Oh, look, you got a black individual there. Doesn't look like a bunch of far-right militia or conspiracy theory types. Are not the typical demographic that would suggest as such, right? Looks like people who are genuinely concerned and standing up for their fundamental rights and freedoms. Now, I did put in here a direct quote from the article. this is the funny part. So they're trying to suggest, the narrative that they're trying to suggest in this article is that the planned protests outside the hospitals, it's sparking outcry. So I was curious as to know, well, who are the ones that are outcrying or being disparaging or insulting those who are standing up for the fundamental freedoms? And who are these people who are doing these protests? Well, who knows? It could be this lady, could be this gentleman, could be this lady, it could be this person. I don't know specifically, but I do know this is a group called Canadian Frontline Nurses is organizing the protest that will be held on Monday in Ontario. The group plans to gather outside 5 hospitals, including one in downtown hospital. So the very group and organization who are putting on these protests are Canadian Frontline Nurses. And I did a little more reading in this article, and you'll find out that the 2 main proponents and organizers of this particular group are actual nurses. So those in the healthcare field. So it sounds a little weird when it's sparking outcry from the medical field, and yet it's the people who are from the medical field who are actually creating the protests. So do you see how using that kind of singularity, that kind of narrative, that kind of as pretending or acting as though all the people in the healthcare field are against protests when it's people from the healthcare field who are putting on these protests? See how that narrative doesn't play out probably well, at least if you're a thinking individual. But yeah, anyways, let me move on a little there. So here was another one that I had revealed. This is another one out of the Telegraph. How scientists who dismissed Wuhan Lab theory are linked to Chinese researchers. So a little conflict of interest there. And I read that article, I believe, on my last stream. But if you want to get a little more information for it, like I say, either check out my Canadian Libertarian page, although my Minds page, the way the feed is set up, I think you'll find that information much more easily and much more readily. So like I say, you can check that. And once again, this has to do with the Wuhan virus thing. Wake up call for Canadian security experts. A case of 2 fired scientists could point to espionage. So that's as it pertains to that Winnipeg lab. Here's another one. Fired Winnipeg lab scientist listed as co-inventor of 2 Chinese government patents. That's interesting. Here, boys more at risk from Pfizer jab side effects than COVID, suggest study. And this is out of the Guardians, folks. So once again, another established media, well, they at least do challenge the narrative. They have some really good contributors in the Guardian. But once again, they've been around a long time. It's a trusted source. And here you have boys that are more at risk from the Pfizer jab side effect than from COVID itself. So watch out for your boys out there, folks. It says here, let me just do a quick little rundown here. Healthy boys may be more likely, this is straight from the article, by the way, more likely to be admitted to hospital with a rare side effect of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID vaccine that causes inflammation of the heart than with COVID itself, U.S. researchers claim. So that's another disturbing fact. What else we got here? Nurses who attended anti-COVID measure rally in D.C. in January helping organize cross-country events. So these are those nurses that I was telling you about. But you see the way the media is trying to present this. And I covered this, and this is a real low blow, folks. So they're trying to tie these 2 women. And if you read the article, they had nothing to do with it. No, they didn't break into the Capitol Hill buildings, right? None of them were wearing horns and laying back in Nancy Pelosi's chair. None of this. These were just people who were, marching, organizing, and protesting these mandates. But you see how the media put that kind of political spin on it? They try to tie these women in with, some really bad characters who were looking to do harm to people in D.C. Like I say, nefarious stuff here, folks. What else we got?
Yeah, you're not allowed to. It's always trust their experts, right? They give them a pedestal and they say, here, trust the experts, but it's only their experts. Like I have a list, and I'm going to do some name dropping of experts out there as well who offer a different opinion to this whole pandemic situation. So we got Dr. Michael Yeadon, former vice president of Pfizer. I would encourage people to go check out him and see what he has to say. You have Carrie Bank Millis, who is the inventor of the PCR test. You have Dr. Simone Gold, founder of Frontline Doctors. You have Dr. Richard Fleming as a top doctor. Dr. Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA technology. Dr. Brian Brittle is a Guelph virologist who's saying that the spike protein doesn't stick and stay in the arm. You had Dr. Li Mengyang, which was a Chinese virologist who was the whistleblower on the Wuhan Lab at the beginning. You had Dr. Vladimir Zenko, who was Trump's doctor, who gave him the COVID treatment, who also warns about negative repercussions of this shot. You have Dr. Lee Merritt, Dr. Wolfgang Wudar. You have all these other doctors. I got a list in front of me, like 100 or so of them long, and I'm not going to go through them for time's sake, but top doctors, very accredited at the tops of the echelons of their professions, who will say a different narrative. You don't hear those names. They get blacklisted. They're thrown down the memory hole. Don't listen to the former head of Pfizer. Listen to the current one. One's wrong, I guess, because he's their top doctor that they say you can trust, but don't trust the former one.
Yeah, actually, I should bring that back up. I did kind of cover this in my last one, but this, like I say, I'm one of those very few. I'm the oddball. I'm one of those people that actually read in articles entirely. And I got to tell you, some of the rhetoric that you find in them kind of almost send a little bit of a chill down your back. But listen to this one, folks. So like this was the one, navigating the COVID-19 vaccine passport society. It won't be easy for those who remain unvaccinated. This is obviously a contributor to CBC News. And I had quoted exactly, this comes straight from the article, as you see. So I wrote, we are definitely not all in this together. Direct quote from the article. As the vaccine passport system begins in many provinces, Jordans said the unvaccinated will crave amenities and activities they once accessed freely and feel inconvenienced. Oh, by the way, this person, I believe if I am 100% correct on my memory in terms of when I was reading this, I believe this person is a psychologist. So someone that studies, the mind and incentive structures for the mind and all that stuff. So someone that is well adapted to understanding how the human mind works. Anyway, so like I say, will crave amenities and activities they once accessed freely and feel inconvenience. They will not enjoy being second-class citizens, being shut out, he said. My bet is they will quietly get vaccinated. Now, listen to this last sentence, verse 2 here, folks. And for the rest of us, for our part, we have to be thankful for every one of them that makes that decision. We have to resist gloating. Oh, that speaks so much. Just 5 words. We have to resist gloating. I mean, the kind of person that's even got that word roaming around in their cranium at the time suggests that they're projecting the fact that this person actually, so I kind of understand psychology a little bit myself there, folks. And what it sounds to me is this psychologist is projecting the fact that, yeah, if we win by using force, coercion, propaganda, we just got to chalk it up that we won. But don't gloat about it. Don't get all snide or snickering, right? Don't go pound back another bottle of that wine and laughing your ass off the fact that you manipulated and coerced a bunch of people to do exactly what you demanded of them. No, keep that on the down low, right? I find that highly disturbing. Not just the fact that someone is in that position and that's the kind of stuff that's running through their mind, but the fact that they're willing to put that in print and feel emboldened to do so. Anyways, let me bring this off here, folks, because like I say, I got lost, but like I say, if you check out my Canadian Libertarian page, a tremendous amount of information pertaining all aspects of not just COVID-19, but multiple other areas as well. But the thing that we're talking and discussing tonight are these vaccine mandates and these passports, because these are the things that's going to have the most profound effect on our social and economic lives, because they're going to literally get to the point. Although let me do a flip side spin on this a little bit, because to be honest with you, as much as I think about it, it is going to be a hindrance to some of us. It's going to be much worse for others. But for people like myself, and I would suspect even some of you, not going to be such a detriment after all. To be honest with you, a lot of these places, especially, well, the way I look at it, just like that coffee shop that I went to the other day, if they are actually willing, if these places, these corporations, these organizations, or these government entities are actually willing to use force and coercion against me, how much of a true hindrance is it that I am not allowed to frequent their establishment? To be honest with you, I'm completely content with never frequenting or darkening the doorstep of any establishment or entity who would wish to support or to preemptively use force or coercion against me. So I'm all for it. And now I get there will be a great amount of segregation in our society, but it'll also put the fire under a lot of our the freedom loving individuals under our ass to create that society that we want to see, right? We perceive the society that we want to live in our minds, but now the fire is going to be put in our ass to actually create and build that society alongside. So yeah, all you people who are supporters of mandates and these vaccine passports, well, you go ahead and you live in your social credit system. But those of us who are not, we'll have our own, we'll create our own establishments, organizations, facilities, businesses who will actually, support freedom. And we'll see how that works out in the genuine market of competition. You can have, like I say, you can keep frequent. I remember that article I read last week or so, and I found it quite disturbing too, is these businesses. So think about this, folks. And the way it was presented to me is like, yeah, what a great way to present it. So these businesses, think about it now. They're willing to forego having us as customers, and we are the very people who have been supporting them all along during the mask mandates, during the lockdowns, and during all the other crazy nefarious things that's government's been doing for the last year and a half. So these businesses are willing to go along to prevent us from frequenting their establishment, and we are the very people who have supported them all along. But now the kind of people that's going to be solely and exclusively allowed into their businesses are the very people who wanted to shut them down. So you enjoy that little bit of relationship, that cozying up with the very people who, or catering to the very people who want nothing more than to destroy your business. See how that works out for you.
Well, yeah, it was designed that obviously they want it that way. But, I always study these people and pay very close attention of how the narratives have continued to change. At first it was, okay, guys, please go get your vaccine. And then it was, okay, guys, please go get your vaccine. Let me give you a prize. Let me throw you in a vax lottery. Let me incentivize you to get the vaccine. And now we're seeing the sudden shift to, okay, guys, you better get the vaccine because now there's some repercussions. You're not going to restaurants. You're not going to sports games. You're not going. So they're escalating, folks. Every day, the rhetoric and what they do physically to us is escalating. So we see this all the time. The news heading, oh, sticks and carrots. We started out using carrots. Now we need to use sticks. You see Australia building COVID concentration camps. You see Canada experimenting with COVID isolation camps with the hotels, which will eventually lead to camps themselves. So I am more of a cynical approach on this. I don't know if my father takes this same approach, but I'm kind of the mindset that if we don't turn things around literally in the next year or so, or very soon, this goes to COVID concentration camps for me and you, the unvaccinated. They will come round us up and they will put us in them. Now, will it get to the point of forced inoculation, force holding you down and sticking a needle in your arm? Maybe, but I think that would probably come after the isolation. I think the next step is they take me and you away to the isolation camps, and they tell the public, well, we need to take these people away. They can't be trusted. They're unvaxxed. They don't listen to the science. They're a threat to the public because they're going to be out there spreading these Delta variants and blah, blah, blah. We can already see them spinning the narrative as it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? That's the new slogan that they keep saying across all these news stations. So I see them painting me, an unvaccinated person, as public enemy number one. And I'm sitting here cynically thinking, they're coming for me, and they're coming for me physically. So next step down this line of progression is taking us away to hotels and isolation centers. Now, and then after that, progressively, the next step would be forced inoculation. And I think we're headed there if we don't turn this thing around.
Hey, anything is possible. And if there's one thing I'm certain of in life is the uncertainty of the future, right? Because, I'm sure, like I say, 100% positive, even though I wasn't there at the time, that a substantial portion of the population of people in every collectivist authoritarian culture in history at some point in time thought, things aren't going to get nearly as bad as what I think or I perceive at the moment, right? I'm pretty sure earlier on, right? Like whether you're talking about fascism under Mussolini or Nazism under Hitler, or like I say, communism under Mao or Stalin. Pretty sure there's a substantial portion of the population saying, hey, it can't happen here. It just can't happen here. And then it did, right? So of course, we should all be being proactive. And of course, my son knows this, and I'll let you know now is, we are, right? We're leading by example, and actually we're not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and making sure that, in the event, right? Not like we have the power to stop authoritarians from being authoritarians, but I think everyone alive today, those who care about your fundamental freedoms and your rights, those inherent and inalienable rights, I'll add, it's the onus is on you. This is where that personal responsibility thing really kicks in, folks, and where you got to lead by example is to place yourself in a position, geographically, socially, economically, so that, when the chips do fall or when things do go awry or much worse than they are now, that you are at least, surrounded by a community of like-minded individuals or groups who are willing to stand toe-to-toe and defy these things. Because the last thing you want to be is place yourself in a situation where in your particular jurisdiction or in your community that you're so massively outnumbered that they can pick you off one by one. This is where it's important, where, like I say, we have to lead by example and truly, genuinely support each other, not just, online in terms of, niceties or being kind to each other and using generous words and kind words, but I mean actually being physically there for each other and economically. Like I said, because our opponents, the authoritarians, they are for each other. They've got each other's back. They're protecting themselves against what they deem us as supposedly a threat, and we have to do the same. So that's what it comes down to the end of the day, folks. There's nothing that's going to stop or prevent bad things from happening.
Nope, you froze. I'm not sure if you froze or I froze.
Why did we lose the?
Oh,
okay,
you're back.
We're back. We're back. That might have been, sorry, folks, but one thing about Starlink is when it's working great, but there are sporadic downtimes of usually just a couple seconds because it's still in its beta stage. But we're not going to get too overly concerned with that because we are back. But I will point this out, just another example. Let me bring this up here one more time because this, and it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with COVID per se, but it definitely speaks volumes as to, like I say, the intentions and the nefariousness of those who would be considered our opponents is this. And this was shared by Paul Joseph Watson. It was a Fox News segment, I guess, but check this out. And Glenn Greenwald, who used to be a regular contributor to The Guardian, who now got his own media outlet that challenges the status quo. I believe it's called The Intercept. You might want to check them out if you want to get some decent information. And I will even say that Glenn Greenwald would typically be considered a left-leaning individual, and he would even admit it as such. But he's a principled individual, not a dogmatist. Anyways, so appearing on Tucker Carlson's show, journalist Glenn Greenwald pointed out how George W. Bush has gone from being roundly reviled by the left to being weirdly held up as some kind of icon as soon as he began criticizing President Trump and his supporters. And I noticed that myself. Like, how crazy that? Like I say, George Bush, right? The guy that took, the American people and a lot of other people around the world into Afghanistan and Iraq, and in particular Iraq, over that fake yellow cake, right? Remember that? They got weapons of mass destruction, and not just left wing, but even principled right wingers at the time were rightfully calling him out for causing such massive destruction and devastation and economic destruction as well of the American economy by accumulating so much debt based over false and fake information, right? But here, like Glenn Greenwald's pointing out, it's funny, huh? Strange bedfellows it is. Now all you have to do is just have a common enemy in terms of Trump these days, and even staunch opponents or enemies are now getting in bed with each other. So that's weird. Find that highly unusual. All right. So yeah, go ahead there, Matt. I just, like I say, just kind of finding a few other things.
No, I would just like to look the camera in the eye right now and the viewers and let everyone know that, nobody's getting us out of this. Nobody's coming to save us but ourselves. I see this a lot in the comments and when I follow things on social media, how, oh, this is the apocalypse, or even the religious folk, how this is the second coming of Jesus and, God's going to save us because it's end times. And I would just like to remind everyone that now, this isn't a bash against religion. I respect religion and I still have my thoughts. I'm not quite sure on the whole religion thing and whether the whole God story and not. But, keep in mind that when the Jews, who are supposed to be the people of God in the Holy Bible, when they're being gassed by the Germans, okay, when they're being gassed by Hitler and their nails are scraping down the walls of the gas chambers, I'm sure they were saying prayers. I'm sure they were telling God, come save them right now from this agony and certain death any minute. And you can look throughout history of the massive genocides at the hands of authoritarian governments. And, all those people are gone and dead. Now, whether there's an afterlife or not, we can debate that. And whether or not Jesus and religion's real and all that, we can debate that. But we do know what for certain is nobody came that day to save all those people that got genocided, okay? And nobody's coming this time either. So unless we stand up and do something to turn this stuff around, and it doesn't have to be a call for violence. Literally, if everyone just not complied peacefully and said, no, not doing it, walked in stores without wearing masks, opened up their businesses, and just simply by the number of us who you can see by the polls out there's at least 20-25% of people in all these different countries who are against this stuff. If just the 20-25% of us simply was a little bit more firm in our non-compliance, we might be able to turn this thing around. And if you're not willing to do the simple basic things of walk into a store without a mask or go and and call a politician up and tell him you piece of your mind and stop doing all these authoritarian actions. And if you're not willing to do the peaceful, non-violent solutions that are still on the table right now, don't sit here and tell me when it gets really rough, you're going to be the first one in the trenches, because these are the easy things. This is go pick the 10-pound sack of potatoes up. When it gets to the point of violence, which me and my father have never called for and don't want it to get to, it's going to be pick that 100-pound sack of potatoes up. So do this stuff now while you can. Do it while it's still, you have some sense of freedom and we can get out there and still speak. Because you know what? I'm seeing lots of beautiful protests in Canada right now, and it's a beautiful thing. But in Australia, they're getting their heads beat in by the police, including old grandmas. And we're not too far from that. So we have to be more firm and more standing against this stuff, because nobody's coming to bail us out. It's all on our shoulders. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. I just got a couple other things. Good points, Matt. Great points there, by the way. Like I said, I just want to get out because, like I say, folks, I get tons of information and what I do is, and as you folks probably realize, is I'm going to place all of these in the description of this stream so that you have access to all these sources of information that you can use to counter the propaganda and the bullshit, that maybe some of your fellow peeps around you have been using. So like I say, use this as you see fit to help counter the true propaganda and misinformation. So in this particular one, this is a National Post article. Pfizer and Moderna say COVID-19 vaccine protection wanes after 6 to 8 months. Ahead of an FDA meeting on COVID vaccine boosters, Pfizer submitted a study suggesting vaccine efficacy fades over time naturally, irrespective of variant. So like I said, I'll make sure to place this in the description of the stream. So irrespective of variant, folks, no matter what variant it is, they're saying that your shots that you've been getting only last 6 to 8 months. So once again, it's not a matter of 2 jabs and you're done, folks. This is further proof of that. Now let me show another, this one, actually, I'll just bring this up here on mine because I'm really filling up my tabs here. I've got a million tabs open, but I'll just do it this way instead so I don't have to keep opening up the million tabs. So this one here, and actually I will say the Atlantic, for a magazine, for a publication, you will find some definite left-leaning types, submitting their articles to this organization. But I will say there are some decent contributors to it, and I still check them out from time to time for that very reason. This one, here's an article of the Atlantic called "A Pandemic of the Unvaccinated," and this was a a paragraph that I quoted from. Often the people who are vaccine hesitant are our own family, friends, and colleagues. That's worth remembering because it reminds us who is at risk if we alienate the unvaccinated. If there's any chance of persuading them to get a shot, and ample evidence shows that doing so is possible, it's not going to happen if we only enforce policies that exclude them, foster resentment, and make them feel like their fears and concerns are being dismissed. Yasmin Tayag argues. Compassion, not coercion, is what's going to get us through this pandemic together. And that I could not agree with more. I mean, I just don't understand how anyone could possibly think that after you sit and insult, deride, and drag my reputation and my name through the mud, or even suggest that I'm a terrible person some way, that I'm somehow going to want to come closer to you or do any of these things that you're asking or requiring me to do. It just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever that these people think that their means to an end is actually going to work out. It's not going to work out at all, because at this point in stage, the people who are the most staunch advocates for these mandates, like I say, not only do I not trust them, but part of me fears them for their intentions. So yeah, like I say, I want nothing to do with these people. I would never submit or comply to any of their orders or demands or edicts. And at this point in time, even if they started reversing course and tried to be honest, well, I would suggest that now they've already destroyed their reputation or their ability to get someone like myself to trust them in the first place. So major fail on behalf of the people that have gone this route. I think it's terrible. This obviously contributed to the article, and Atlantic thinks it's a terrible idea. And I think most of you probably agree with that assessment.
All right, so let me offer a few solutions now, since we're deep into this podcast, and I don't want it to be all problems without some solutions. So some solutions. So we know we have blockchain technologies. Now, blockchain technologies are a good way to distribute information on ledgers and be somewhat anonymous, right? So what I would like to see is, and Twitter, Jack Dorsey has even hinted at doing this, like a shadow Twitter, kind of like a Twitter that's based on a blockchain that you could never censor or get rid of, because once it's on the blockchain, it's there forever. Now, that has implications, obviously, with it, of people posting stuff on there that might be illegal. But I see it as we need to figure out a tool as a way to organize things and forms of resistance. Now, let me give some examples here. The mask in the stores. Now, you as an individual, you walk into a store and you're not wearing a mask. The lady at the front says, "Oh, put your mask on. You're supposed to have a mask." You say no. Normally what happens, they call the police on you. A police officer shows up. If you still choose to not leave or flex your rights, you'll mostly end up in handcuffs. Now, what happens when a group of, let's say, 50 people decide to get together and go to a store and do a organized shop in with not wearing a mask? Now, we've seen people like Chris Sky, an activist that I enjoy watching his work here in Toronto. We've seen him do organization pop-up things like this. Now, they work because the police show up and they're like, "Oh my God, we don't have enough cops to arrest everyone right now not wearing a mask." You see this in the protest, right? If the group is small, the police rule in, they beat the craps out of them, end of protest. If the group is large and they outnumber the police just sit back that day and they wait for it to be a small group as the day that they move in, or they go harass the activists elsewhere. And also, nobody wants to pop their head up and be the organizer of these mass resistant movements, because what happens, the police always go after the head honchos, right? The Chris Guys, the head guys running a lot of these things. So if there's a way we could combine blockchain technologies as a way, as like a ledger, to say, "Hey guys, we're planning a protest." That way there's no figurehead because it's anonymous. It's done on the blockchain, although someone has to be the one who initiates it. But that's what we need. We need pop-up rallies of people not wearing masks in stores or going to restaurants. We need pop-up protests and stuff like that. And folks, I used to be the one who I protested like crazy back in the early 2000s. I took a break from it because I got frustrated because I see not many results came from it. But now I'm realizing that we need to get back into the protest spirit, because all of us locked in our house, we don't really feed off each other's energy because we're not surrounding each other. And what this pandemic has taught me, and what these people like, is if they isolate us all into our houses, it's easy to pick on us as individuals. It's harder to do that when we're out on the streets in strength. So the more we take to the streets, the more we organize pop-up protests, pop-up not wearing a mask, pop-up mass resistance, these peaceful things that we could do, the more effective they are. But we need to figure a way to do it in which that you can do it anonymously, because nobody wants to be the figurehead. I even see that Jordan Peterson, the Alex Joneses, all these big, huge people, they don't want to be the ones to lead the revolution, because they know the minute they take their rhetoric to that next step is the minute that the police knock on their door and take them out. Look at Martin Luther King. Look at all these people throughout history. Anyone that's organized any kind of big rally, peaceful or non-peaceful, usually are the first ones to be taken out. So we need to combine blockchains and anonymous technologies as a way to link it with protesting. And we need to get out there, because I found that you as an individual, you go to the store, you take your mask off, like I say, you create that incident, you don't garner that much support. But if you walk in there with a group of 20 people not wearing a mask, you get the other shoppers that go, oh my God, they're doing it, and they rip their mask on. Or when you're out in the protests and the police are smashing your head in, you get a few people who say, you know what, no, and they push the police officer back, say, you're not going to smash that grandma's head in. I'm not going to allow it. That creates more people to protect each other. We need to feed off each other's energy, and we're not getting that when we're all sitting locked in our houses, isolated.
That's true. More great points, Matt. Excellent. Good stuff.
And if anything, go out to the protest just to meet like-minded individuals. You might go home at the end of the day and feel like nothing got accomplished. You wave some signs, hoorah, hoorah, but you got to meet people face to face who thought and were like you, and you can start organizing these type things. It can't only just be the Chris guys out there organizing these pop-up rallies and ways to peacefully resist this stuff.
Yeah. And you know what? This here, even stories like this and examples of people like this are definitely going to help bring around some of those people that are either fence setters or typically defer to authority, right? Because we do recognize, especially in Canada, right, there's a lot of our fellow citizens who defer their own thinking and their own cognitive abilities to authority. And I find that highly disturbing. But like I say, it's stories and examples like this who are going to cause those people, even those people, to question, these thought leaders or these healthcare professionals or experts or the political or media class. So this one is an example out of so it's Canada. It's a first person news article. I like to tell you why I'm ineligible for a vaccine passport. I had a severe anaphylactic reaction to the COVID-19 vaccine, and now I'm hesitant to get the second dose. This was reported by Cody Darnell, September 19th, 2021. Like most Canadians, I was eager for the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. It was our way out of the pandemic and back to normalcy. At 33 years old, with no reason to be prioritized, I was not first in line. While I waited my turn, I watched the process unfold. First, my husband, who works in healthcare, got his first dose. As the age priority system worked its way down the line, my parents, in-laws, friends, and siblings followed suit. It was May when I got the text that I was free to go forward and book my own first doses at a vaccine clinic. The jab itself was painless, but within 10 minutes of my mandatory post-shot waiting period, my tongue felt thick and tingled as though I had devoured multiple bags of salt and vinegar chips. I quickly lost the ability to swallow and became dizzy. A doctor then put a shot of epinephrine into my leg as I lay behind the observation curtain of the vaccination center. And as I lay there, convulsing from the adrenaline coursing through my body, the doctor said, "You'll probably have to have your second dose at a hospital." Everything seemed to stop at that moment. I blinked, sure that he was joking, but also struck by the earnest look on his face that suggested otherwise. I half grimaced through chattering teeth and said, "It's cute that you think I'm going to do this again." That was when the ambulance showed up. So like I say, I won't read the entire article per se, but once again, this is an example of someone who actually, as you can tell by the way this article was written, that was someone that was totally on board with going to get the vaccine, right? But it was a clear example of someone who obviously had a quite negative reaction. And we know there's multiple stories and many examples of people who have had very terrible and much worse outcomes and reactions to the vaccines. And by the established media and the political class to be constantly finger wagging at people who are, such as that, who are hesitant or not wanting to go get their second jab or maybe even their first because someone else they've known had a really bad reaction is, like I say, when that person has real world experience, real world negative experience from having a vaccine, and then you're going to see, or then they see articles from the established media saying that all these people who aren't getting vaccinated are a bunch of, anti-vaxxers. Well, think about what that's doing for a woman like that who was completely on board with getting vaccinated. And she has people in her life that she's going to talk about. And because she was the kind of person that was willing to line up for the jab, she's already got credibility for the pro-vax crowd. So what are they going to do? Turn their back on her? The fact that the minute she says, well, I had a really negative reaction, so I don't necessarily want to run to get my second shot because I don't know what kind of effect a second shot might be much worse. Do you think the people in her immediate circle, her family and friends, are going to turn their backs immediately on her, right? Because they know of that example of what she had to go through? Doubtful. I would imagine at that point, there might be a substantial portion of her inner circle of friends or family members who might themselves be questioning the narrative by these establishment media hacks, because they're leaving people like that, letting them slip through the cracks. And if really at the end of the day, if we're caring about people's outcomes and being in good health and not suffering, just like remember back in the day, if we can save just one person, right? Well, if you could save this one lady, right, you have a potential right there, like I say, to see that conflict and that divide shrink for some groups because they recognize that, this person had no ill intentions whatsoever, but is just questioning why is there such a desire and need to force or impose these medical procedures or these vaccines on people who rightfully have cause to be concerned.
Yeah, so I just want to address one of the comments here. I see it being a good discussion. So Dave says, yes, let's protest our masters. This guy has no idea what his shirt means. Now, Dave, when I say protest, I said in the same sentence that it may not accomplish anything at the end of the day. But what you gather and what you gain from going to a protest is physically linking arms with like-minded individuals. You can sit there and type away on the keyboard and be a keyboard warrior. You're not going to change anything or convince minds virtually, okay? People react to seeing physical action taking place. So if we go down here, he says the battle is in the people's minds, not protests in the streets and legitimizing the whole immoral system and government. We're not there yet. We're going to flip the switch. And me and my father are anarchists, libertarians. We believe the state is forced and it's immoral. But we're not at the point where it's going away tomorrow. Good God, you can't convince 75% of people not to run and get a jab for a virus that's 0.003 deadly, right? So we're not there quite yet, Dave. I wish it was that utopia where we could just convince the masses to not believe in government anymore. What we do understand is people react to seeing things. So like I say, when you're at the store with your mask on and you see a group of 20 people walk by without the mask on, you're more susceptible as a human being to take the mask off in the moment. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying go out, link up with like-minded individuals, and start coming up with solutions, because you're not going to do it virtually, okay? The revolution was people meeting up in pubs, talking, going over ideas, coming up with solutions. So I'm not sitting here with a Mole on Lave shirt thinking just go out there and protest your masters. That's going to win. No, it's the act of going out and linking arms with your fellow activist individuals and coming up with physical solutions, because typing on the keyboard's not working, guys, clearly, or we'd be winning this thing, right? And that's how things are going to be done, through physical action, not through virtual stuff like that, right? The mandates are going to be ended if people physically resist and stop going along with them. The vaccine passport is going to be stopped if people don't go with it, right? It's not virtually doing it, it's physically doing it.
Yeah. I'll just add and reiterate more or less the same thing there, Dave. Maybe you're not familiar with, and if you're new to the channel, first I'll just mention thanks for joining the stream and sharing your thoughts. Once again, we always welcome any opinion or perspective, and I like to have my premises challenged as well. But I will just point out, just like my son has, is we're talking about, we're trying to reach people, like I say, who might not necessarily be, in the same kind of knowledge base or have the same kind of knowledge base as you or I may do. Now, yes, the state, now I don't quite understand what your comment said. The state is not force, it's violence. It is both. I would suggest that the state is force and it is violence, because they kind of go hand in hand. But I get what you're saying. But this is the point that my son's trying to make, and I'll try to further elaborate or expand on. Is it does none of us any good. And I spent years, right? Probably since 2000 and I don't know what 08, 09, or I've spent years, and I feel like it was a complete and utter waste of time for, whether you're talking about minarchists, limited state libertarians, right, or full on anarchists, people who aren't believers in government, right? I've seen too many years and too many examples of infighting and a severe waste of time and resources fighting amongst each other over these nuances. And like I say, you're preaching to the choir here. I get you. Now, if there are some people that might need to hear what you have to say, I'm sure, and I hope you can get through them as best you can. But it does no good to try to stir up or create any division for those of us that are frequenting this particular stream. Because, like I say, if you had knowledge, a good fundamental knowledge of me and my son and our history and what we believe in and what we stand for and promote, you would already realize that you're whistling past the grave, or should I say, you're preaching to the choir. We're very much advanced in our knowledge in terms of what freedom and liberty means.
Well, let me say it another way. Virtually, guys, we're all understanding we're getting censored, right? All the leftists and the communists or the double maskers out there aren't tuning in to the Canadian Libertarian YouTube channel today. Unfortunately, we wish we could reach them, but they're probably not, for many reasons, as we're probably blacklisted. They're not seeking out our information. It's demonetized. It's censored. So you know what you can't censor, Dave? You can't censor going down to the local bar, sitting there without a mask on and talking to your like-minded neighbors or people that aren't like-minded, but at least debating ideas in person. You can't censor the conversation in person. So, this whole activism virtually is just not working out, guys. It was working out and then it got effective. So what did the response was? Censorship, right? That's right. So they're winning that war, right? We don't have our own Facebooks. We don't have our own Twitters. We're starting with Gab and all these other social medias, but they're not quite there yet. And they're more of echo chambers. So we needed boots on the ground, people out in the streets, talking to people and waking them up, shaking them, saying, hey, we have tyranny creeping at our door here. You need to start taking this stuff serious. And people take it more serious. I don't know if you guys ever realized this, or you probably do. And when you're physically in front of someone, it's different than typing stuff to them, right? It's one thing to tell people to wake up over the internet. It's another thing to look them in the eye and see the seriousness in your pupils and be like, guys, they're taking our rights away. I can't go to a restaurant tonight. Okay, so I'm not saying you go out there and protest your masters, wave a flag. I'm saying go out on the street and get linked up with people. Come up with solutions. Build alternative platforms. So they want to censor us on Twitter. We build an uncensorable Twitter. They want to deflate our money. We build Bitcoin. We're doing things correctly. We're building structures beside these other tyrannical structures. But a lot of that is physically done, right? We got to get out there and physically do it. I just see a lot of virtual activism nowadays. And I like going to these protests, and they would be a lot more effective and bigger if more of these virtual warriors would get actually out there and link up with people. And I've went to many. I've went home from many and say, what really did I accomplish that day? But you know what? It was maybe those few conversations I had that day with the people that were wearing the mask, that were on the fence. Maybe that was someone I actually brought over to the side. And they took it a lot more serious because we were able to connect on a human level face to face. This virtual stuff is destroying everything.
Yeah. And I will just say, Dave, I'm glad that you are putting a lot of content out there and talking to people every day in your small business. And that's what I do. Actually, I'm sure every one of us, I'm sure we all have examples where in our own personal lives, when we're not on social media, we're talking to people. Of course, you have to gauge that, right? It's all about each experience and how that's going to play out. So I always take advantage, the minute, especially, and in particular, somebody brings up the topic first and foremost, so that I don't have to seem like the one that's trying to push my views on someone. But the minute someone brings up anything as it pertains to COVID-19 or mask mandates, I too, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the chat do the same thing, is vocalize, our own opinions and perspective and support for freedom and liberty. And I'm glad for you for doing that, like I say. But this is the area, like I say, where it's more important for us to, and I welcome your criticism. I welcome your offering of different solutions or opportunities that we can take advantage of. And I definitely am with you there, that I'm open for all of them. But once again, it does us no good by playing this. And I'm not even suggesting you're doing as much, but I know other people do, is playing this because I've seen it play out for too many times. Like I say, is this it's almost like a dick measuring contest to one up each other to see who's more against authoritarianism in the state. Listen, even with Minarchus, I've got lots of disagreements with Minarchus, and Anarcha Rika, she knows this, right? And she does as well. But I got to tell you, at the end of the day, I'm in much better company with a minarchist who's at least questioning that authority to some degree in some regard than those who are the blind conformists, right? That's our area of contention, is we got to stop like looking at trying to one up each other. And I get it. Listen, I'm all on board with some friendly competition, and that's what really elevates each other. So I'm not saying that it's not good to challenge each other. But like I say, at this particular point in time now, right, the walls are caving in or closing in quick. And we got to spend more time, like I say, doing what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is exactly what you're saying, is talk to as many people as you can, take advantage of any situation or scenario that arises where you can help educate and inform. But mostly those are the ones I would say concentrate and focus particularly on those who are advocating for force or coercion or the use of violence against you. Those of us who aren't, we might have varying degrees of levels of acceptance in terms of statism or government. But once again, at least we have the same goals and intentions, which is to reduce it, right? I might want to reduce it more than my neighbor, but as long as I know my neighbor isn't looking to force or impose their will on me, and we might have a few disagreements along the way, well, like I say, at least I know I found a fellow traveler and someone that I can at least respect enough to carry that torch of freedom and liberty. But thank you for bringing up your points of contention and your concern, Dave. And hopefully, like I say, we'll get a chance to have a conversation. I will just mention right now, I'm always willing to bring people onto my channel. You can be a guest. I invite you right now if you want to be a guest on a future live stream. I'll bring you on and we can discuss this further. Watch my videos to libertarians on the difference between force and violence. I linked to your channel on that one. Well, thank you for offering that link, and maybe I'll be able to see exactly what you mean between the difference of violence and force, and I will possibly respond to it, or we can have a conversation regarding it going forward.
And all I was getting at, to sum it up, Dave, and
Yep.
everyone in the friendly banter, is I hang out in the activist space, and I'd say probably 90% of us are virtual warriors and 10% are physical boots on the ground. And I'm saying both are effective, and we should be doing more of the physical boots on the ground stuff. Because that's when, with the massive, if we were 5 years ago and YouTube was the wild, wild west and we could actually get out there and penetrate information out to the sheeple, I'd say still use all the digital. But we're past that now. They've ratcheted in you got the Taliban removed from Twitter, or the Taliban on Twitter, and President Trump taken off Twitter. We're dealing with a different beast now. They've ratcheted down the censorship to such a point where we're barely getting any reach out there to the people who need to hear this information. And it's just an echo chamber with us tonight, all bantering with each other, sharing the same ideas in the chat. And it's great, and it's fun, and it's good sense of entertainment. But what really is it doing tonight to win the hearts and minds and bring this fight back to a good actual physical resistance? And I just don't see it. I see a lot of the virtual guys. I just don't see the physical stuff. And when I talk to those guys, I say, why am I going to go down to a protest, wave a flag? What's that going to accomplish? It's the people you meet that day. There's people I meet at protests that I would have never met before in my personal life unless I went down that day to the protest. And it's sharing those ideas in person. And there's people that are walking on the street who are looking at you guys chanting and walking past who might be fence sitters who you might be able to have a conversation with. And so as the censorship gets more hardcore and the Gabs and the other alternative medias just aren't quite there yet with enough leftists on them to actually get some reach, we need to get out there and get physically active protesting. And protesting comes in many forms. It could be going into a store without a mask with a bunch of your buddies. It could be going down to the local hospital and talking about adverse reactions to the vaccines and stuff like that with people who are going in to get the jabs. I don't know, but we need to be more active. That's all. The crux of what I was getting at is we need to do more and not just all in the virtual stuff, because I'm worried that the mainstream has ratcheted the propaganda and the censorship to such a good point now where we're barely effective in the virtual realm the same way we were 5 years ago debating libertarian and minimalism ideas on YouTube 5 years ago. You can't do that stuff anymore. Any of those stuff is you never see those in your recommended. And here's an experiment. Set up a brand new YouTube account. And don't search anything. Just go search a brand new one and see what you get in the recommended. It's cat videos. It's Nicki Minaj's new music video. You don't get anything like Canadian Libertarian. You don't get any actual content like this stuff. So unless people are actively seeking out that stuff, they're not finding it by just coming and searching and scrolling on the internet the same way you could 5 years ago. So I just once again, getting back to the point, I think we need to do more stuff out in the public because they can't censor you going out and talking to your neighbor yet.
Yeah. Well, to me, at the end of the day, too, and I'll just offer this up, and I think we should soon tie this stream up, but I'll just offer for me, and like I said, I would never suggest or pretend to know what everyone should do at all times. I suggest, just like in the free market, allow people's competitive methodologies or what they want to do to stand up for the rights, allow the market to speak, and what works best, right, will work out best for those. Anyways, but for me in particular, I will say I wouldn't be 100% comfortable. Let's say for me in particular, I'm not suggesting that other people shouldn't do it. I wouldn't be particularly comfortable, let's say linking up with a dozen of my closest friends or fellow freedom fighters and going into a particular establishment with no mask, because I personally think that actually gives the media and the control freaks a narrative to play by. Look at these bunch of troublemakers, these hoodlums, right? Me personally, what I would do instead, and once again, I'm not suggesting that you have to do what I do. I'm just saying for me in particular, something that comes off the top of my head would be no. But if there's 5 different establishments in a 1 mile radius, and I can find one that does not support these mandates or these passports, well, that is what I would do. I would be voting and protesting with my feet and my dollars heading off into that particular establishment who respects my sovereignty and my rights and my freedoms. And that way, like I say, the people that are doing that will be emboldened even further, and the businesses will actually be able to flourish because people will be frequenting their establishment. And then once again, if the media has to report on, the establishment was all about freedom of choice and conscience and bodily autonomy, the customers were all about freedom of choice, autonomy and bodily or choice. And then the employees, if all the people involved all support, freedom and liberty and their sovereignty and their autonomy, then how's the media going to spin that, right? Much, much more difficult for the media to try to portray all of those people involved in that scenario in such a negative light. But it's quite easily, and we've seen them do it quite a few times in the past, for them to take examples of people who go into a particular establishment without masks and just kind of protest in that manner. Not saying that you shouldn't do it. Like I say, to each their own, do your thing. But there's a multitude of examples and methods that we can use. And let's be creative in thinking about even more ways that we can use, like I say, to still live in this modern crazy world that we live in while still practicing our rights and freedoms and our liberties in as many ways and areas as we can. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we want. I want to live as free as I possibly can, and so do you. So let's find as many ways as possible to make that a reality.
And I always wish that we would, you'd see subdivisions, right? A lot of people live in these urban subdivisions. Wouldn't it be nice if we had subdivisions of liberty-minded people living together? Now, we see this exodus going on. People are leaving California and all heading to Texas. Well, we need somewhere in Canada. We need the Texas of Canada. Now, I don't know where that is. My father there, he's on the east coast of New Brunswick. I'm currently in Ontario. And we already know Alberta has kind of a more rebellious feel to it. But we need to find pockets in certain provinces and all live with each other or live around each other. Because I would feel a lot better as an activist, as someone has tyrannies encroaching, knowing that everyone on the street that I live on is people who think like me. And if they come knocking at the doors and bringing tyranny to our doorstep, that we're all going to rise up, because literally we're all neighbors with each other, right? If you study any kind of protest groups and any kind of governments who are abusing their people, They back down when they're outnumbered. They attack when they have the numbers on their side.
Yeah.
So we're never going to be safe unless we start having each other's backs. And what a better way to do that than to live by each other? That's why Texas right now is able to maintain their openness while country or states just adjacent to them are completely locked down. It's because they had enough people stuff themselves into that province, all with the same ideology, who don't want any lockdowns. We need that in Canada. So I know a lot of people financially can't do that, but maybe some people who financially can start the process. But man, it would be nice for some province, some jurisdiction, somewhere to start marketing themselves as, hey, this is the town to come to start this resistance and live peacefully and independent.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like with blockchain, just like with the cryptocurrencies, just like in the past with having, your currencies not completely controlled in the hands of central planners. The point of having things like gold and silver and actual commodities as the means for your money and a means to store, exchange, and retain your value is that you can find ways. There's always a way. Human beings are innovative, we're creative, and we will find a way, and we have the proper incentive, right? Think about the ones who are fighting for the freedom. There's much, much more incentive, behind what we're fighting for than those who are fighting to suppress or destroy other people's freedoms. Sure, that might get some of them might get some thrill. The sociopaths among us, no doubt, enjoy it. But you got to expect that the majority of the people in the population are just trying to navigate through this mess and go along with what they perceive are the people who are putting forth the notion that they care about others. But once again, once this is played out long enough, more and more people are coming to realize that the people who are pretending to be benevolent and caring about others, like perfect example with these doctors, and how many examples have we seen of these doctors who are advocating for even I've seen them saying, well, we should deny these people medical services. And I swear to you, I don't have them right in front of me, but I will try to find a couple examples of that and link them in the description of the stream of, like I say, actual doctors, right? Do no harm that are actually saying, these people, these unvaccinated, well, maybe we shouldn't allow them to even use our resources or the healthcare. Now, are they saying, well, if they're not going to be able to use our healthcare resources in socialized Canada, right? Well, are we going to at least stop taking and robbing their paychecks and their income or their livelihoods or their wealth to pay for it? No, they still want to steal your money. They just don't want to provide you a service. So, like I say, to pretend that these people are benevolent, if you went through all of those years to become a doctor, you did it knowing full well that there are obese people that eat way more than they should and end up frequent hospitals way more than they should because of their poor eating habits. Or what about those people that we watch on a regular basis who are in, dangerous sports such as, motorcycle racing or I don't know, horse race. I mean, there's a multitude of things that people do, or even in jobs, firefighters. While everyone else is running away from a fire, what is the job of a firefighter? What is the point of a firefighter but to run directly towards danger, right? To place themselves in jeopardy, in danger. So these are people, I mean, are we going to get to the point now where, well, hey, the hospitals are so overwhelmed. Listen, we can't be having firefighters out there running into burning buildings because all they'll end up doing is getting burnt themselves. And then they'll be down here frequenting our facility. Or you know what? We got to tell people, put down that ice cream, put down that chocolate bar, because you're going to be using up no, there's no historical precedent whatsoever of anyone in the healthcare fields, trying to deny people their service, whether it's paid through a socialist system or under private care. There's no precedent whatsoever of trying to deny people a service based on the fact that you would disagree with them or that they might, choose to do things that places them in potential harm or danger, right? Even someone who has committed suicide and maybe it didn't exactly work. Let's say they jumped off a 5-story building. They had obvious ill intentions towards themselves, right? To kill themselves. That was the point. But if they didn't die, just broke up a bunch of their bones and were still alive and savable, are we suggesting doctors now are going to say, well, listen, hey, this person chose to jump off that balcony, so you know what? not wasting my resources on them. They chose to make that choice. Is that what they're going to start putting forth now? Like I say, that slippery slope, and for any doctor to be foolish enough to even put forth that kind of premise or notion without even thinking long enough about what that implies or the implications for the rest of people in society. Like I say, these are people who have an authoritarian mindset. They're accustomed to having an extreme amount of control and being able to set the rules and dominating most people in their particular group or their field or their community. And that's what it is at the end of the day. That's that power, right? And as we all know, power has a corrupting nature. And that's what we're seeing that's taking place today, are these people who are more pissed off of the fact that they're losing power and control than they are about you having a potential coming down with COVID or possibly being harmed. They're not caring about you. They're caring about their control and their ability to maintain their control. But anyways, like I say, folks, I'm going to let Matt tie this up and finish up the stream. And then we're going to, like I say, put an end to it because we got about 2 hours and 19 minutes in. And I know you folks are patient. And I thank you all for spending this time with us. But like I said, I don't want to go on too much further. We'll set up another stream not too distant in the future, and we'll talk about even more things going forward. But go ahead, Matt. Tie up the stream for us, man.
Well, I'll just tie up, kind of summarize what we covered here. So we've been over the fact that scientists were going to DARPA and said, hey, give us $14 million. We want to aerosolize spray bats with a novel coronavirus that happen to be more contagious to humans as well. We know now that this stuff was created in a lab. So when you're out talking to the regular public, just let them know, like, you know, the talking points now we should be getting through to people is: one, this virus was created by humans; two, it was released; and three, why has nobody been held accountable for it, right? You know, 9/11 kills some people. We go to war with Iraq, you know, all these tragedies in the world, every life matters, right? But the lives, nobody gets held accountable for any of this stuff. So, you know, we need to get, I find all the politics and the news story and the news cycle nowadays just to keep you distracted, keep you talking about the latest, greatest conversation. But we need to get back to the point of governments created the virus, they released it, and nobody's being held accountable. People need to go to jail for this stuff. This is serious. This is biological warfare. This is serious stuff. And until we see people being held account, then nothing's going to change, right? As you, as the average citizen, what keeps us all in line, right? It's fines, it's threat of imprisonment, right? It's the justice system that stands there and says, we have to lay out these fines and punishments to deter you from doing criminal behaviors. Well, if the justice system is going to just simply turn a blind eye when the higher ups completely violate the laws as such that the way they do, we need to put the pressure on those people. We need to get some people held accountable. I'm all for solutions, and yeah, just get out there, get mobile, talk to your family, talk to your loved ones, move to provinces that are more open friendly versus lockdown friendly. And unfortunately, I take the more cynical approach. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I think we're just in the start of this. I think it's going to head towards more lockdowns and more mandates. And unfortunately, we're in for one hell of a winter.
Right on. Sounds good, Matt. Anyways, like I say, folks, one thing I will say before I do finally hit the end of this broadcast is that if you got friends or other people in your community that don't particularly want to frequent YouTube because they're disgruntled or pissed off about YouTube, and rightfully so, I understand that, let them know that this stream, as well as any other stream I've done in the past, or most of them, and any that I'm going to do in the future, or we'll do in the future together, are going to be up on Rumble and Odyssey as well. So as soon as I'm done with this particular stream, I'm going to make sure to do the upload right away. So like I say, if you have other people that want to listen to this kind of information who maybe don't want to watch YouTube because they're boycotting YouTube for some reason or whatever, like I say, just let them know that they can find my content or our content over on Rumble and Odyssey. And like I say, we'll always make sure that we have redundancy and somewhere else to find this information, just in the event or the case YouTube decides to shut us down as well. So have yourself a great night, folks. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in the next live stream. It's Canadian Libertarian. I love liberty.